Welcome to What If I Don't Like It? I'm your host, Katie Baldessaro. On this episode, we'll be talking with actress, singer, writer, and Movie Night Extravaganza's resident Greta Gerwig correspondent, Lauren Chouinard. We'll be talking about the 2011 homage to Italian cannibal films, Eli Roth's Green Inferno. Welcome back to What If I Don't Like It? This is episode 9. I am, of course, your host, Katie Baldessaro. And we have a really interesting topic and a wonderful guest lined up for you today. It is, of course, the 1st of April. There are no pranks in this show. We're not celebrating the April Fools. I don't really care for pranks, so you can listen to this episode without any anxiety that something funny might happen, air quotes on the funny, because it would be a silly prank. This is just a normal episode that happens to come out on the 1st because our episodes come out on the 1st and the 15th. So put your anxiety aside about that and spend it in a better place, because we're going to talk about Eli Roth and Green Inferno on this episode. So your anxiety will not go unused, is the nice way to say it. In this episode, I speak with actress, singer, writer, film critic, Movie Night Extravaganza's resident Greta Gerwig correspondent, Lauren Chouinard. She has been on a few Movie Night Extravaganzas with me as well, and that's how we met. We've been talking through Instagram, shared love of films, and we got talking about how, despite really loving Eli Roth as an actor, they're not super keen on them as a director, having really just seen like Hostel and some of the earlier stuff that he's done. Feels like it might be a little too physically intense to have any kind of depth or meaning. I found that to be an interesting statement because when I first encountered Eli Roth's work, I too felt the way that Lauren was describing, particularly with the film Hostel, which I saw in theaters and seemed to be completely just, shocked that that could be made, but not in the kind of way where I was like, yay, that could be made. More in the kind of like, I don't know why that got made. But as I got older, I came to understand something about these kinds of films and what would be body horror, as I started to encounter more of body horror films, that I think is really important to me as a viewer of horror, and may vary for people who are viewers of entertainment just to begin with. I really like to come to things like horror, your psychological dramas, your really intense types of media, because I'm microdosing a difficult or tense situation in a safe environment. I'm basically doing like EMDR with a horror movie, and so that I can then handle the topic in my day-to-day without as much anxiety or as much discomfort. And that's a real service. I think a lot of people approach horror movies as something that's really just for thrill seekers or adrenaline junkies or people who just want to feel uncomfortable because it's cool. And Lauren and I definitely get into that and how that affects your viewership, especially if you're a woman. I just think it's really important to note that it's not just about enduring Eli Roth's work. It's about why you would endure that work. And we'll be covering that, plus more, as we get into the episode. I do want to tell you all about the wonderful things that Lauren does, especially because she is going to be in a musical adaptation of American Psycho, which could not be more exciting and interesting and like one of a kind. You really gotta go check this kind of stuff out if you're in the Bay Area. It is part of the Bay Area Diverse Musical Theater, or BAD musicals. Not actually bad, but we do love an acronym. She's gonna be in it. It's going to be running July 12th through the 21st in San Jose, California, and you can get tickets by going to badmusicaltheater.com. Again, that link's going to be in the liner notes as well. I wish I could go. I'm hoping that maybe there'll be a recording that I could wind up seeing. So if you're in the area, go check it out, support Lauren, and get to see a really unique, fun, wonderful musical. She just finished being in a production of Little Shop of Horrors to give you an idea of the kind of musicals and things that they're going to be in. It's going to be a little less than normal in the most wonderful of ways, and I am going to be pretty jealous of those who do get to attend. All of that kind of stuff is going to be in the liner notes, and you can connect with her there. Without much further ado, let's join Lauren and really start to crack this nut open, because there's a lot to cover when you start to think about why people come to horror movies and why some people may be hesitant to do so. Without much further ado, we're going to join Lauren and start our discussion. I do want to let you know the bump at the beginning right now is not going to be from Green Inferno. It's actually a clip of Lauren singing a segment of a song from the American Psycho musical that she is in. I wanted all of you to get the chance to hear her voice. It is really breathtakingly beautiful and haunting, much as anything about American Psycho should be. So enjoy that little tidbit before we start our discussion on why some people really like horror and why some people are hesitant to try the genre.
Am I someone he could linger on, or would he simply move along? Am I someone he could love more, or am I just a girl before?
Welcome to episode 9. We're joined by Lauren Chouinard, and we're here to talk about Eli Roth and Green Inferno, and why you might not be super interested in both of those things. But before we do, let's talk about Lauren and who you are, what you do. Let's just start with, how do we know each other?
Hi there. I'm super happy to be here. So we've met and been on several episodes of the Movie Night Extravaganza podcast. And yeah, and then just kind of went from there, Instagram friends, TikTok friends. But yeah, I am super excited for this episode. I love movies. So I went to Chapman University for film, but not film production. I went as a part of their PR and advertising program. So I really learned like entertainment
Yeah.
marketing. And I've always just been a really big fan of movies. And when I was in film school, I decided that I was going to kind of broaden my horizons a little bit, because prior to going to film school, I had like two genres in my that I loved, and that was like rom-coms and musicals, because I'm a theater kid. And so I, grew up watching classic musicals, like lots of just really good kind of feel good stuff. And it wasn't until I started my education that I started to branch out into other genres. And yeah, my whole life I had convinced myself that I hated horror movies, because I'm a millennial and I grew up with a certain kind of, movie in the 2000s. Um, and then I realized that I really like horror movies, and I started watching stuff like Get Out and all of Ari Aster's stuff, and just getting into some of the older, classic horror. I really like Dario Argento and things like that. But yeah, but there's just one little genre I can't get past, which is why I'm here today.
Exactly. It's so funny because I feel like we are uh, sides of the same coin. In that, like, I grew
Yeah.
up very into horror, and I only until recently, only until doing movie runtime and taking this dedicated choice of watching random films based mostly on their length and trying out different flavors, having people on TikTok recommend something to me because they'll get so excited, it's hard not to have that be infectious. So I've been trying rom-coms and musicals.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We have parallel lives.
And I have to ask you right now, we've been talking about Moonstruck a lot on this show on multiple episodes because it is a very uniting rom-com. Top rom-com for you? Recommendation that I might catch?
Okay. Well, I really like, for modern rom-coms, I've always really loved When Harry Met
Mhm.
Sally, like, ever since I was a little kid, but my favorite rom-com of all time is Bringing Up Baby,
Oh,
with Katharine Hepburn.
okay.
That movie just since I was a little kid, just always made me laugh, and I just think it's so charming and sweet. I also think it's really cute when 2 gay people pretend like they're in love, on screen. Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant, but yeah, like, it's so charming and funny and sweet and romantic, and it just always puts me in a good mood. So I always recommend it to people, especially if they aren't super familiar with, like, 1930s, 1940s cinema. I'm like, it's a good place to start.
Yeah, definitely. I've never even heard of it, and I'm totally excited to watch it now. I do like some of that cinema, although I tend to go more towards your like Sunset Boulevard. Still find
Oh,
the dark
yeah.
ones.
Oh, that one's a great one. That one's an amazing
Strangers
one.
on a Train.
Kind of, romantic. She's in love with herself, so
Yes, it's extremely in love with herself. And Christina actually got us to watch. It's the Sweeney Todd. I was like the Barber of Seville one, with the
Mhm,
stabbing
my
and
favorite
Sacha Baron.
musical.
It was really much, much better than I had any level of anticipation for. And I'm going to admit something dirty on the air. I have not seen or heard any of the songs except for the one where everybody sings all at once in turn from Les Mis.
Oh my god, no
And I just
way.
heard somebody sing Quiet, empty chairs and empty rooms. Is that it?
Empty chairs and empty tables,
And I'm
yeah.
like standing outside a window, and inside the window is everyone who knows Les Mis, and I have my hand on the glass, and I'm like, maybe I should go in. It looks warm in there.
Oh, absolutely. You'll hear, like, On My Own, and once you hear On My Own and you go to any future audition, you'll be like, "Wow, every girl is Eponine, and every girl knows On My Own," and once you hear it, you can't unhear it. It's insane.
I often make the joke that every woman my age does the 10 things I hate about you monologue when they're at an audition. Like we could all just go into it and get 4 different women to do one word each.
So real.
Ah, man. All right. All right. So I also know that we're kind of hinting towards this because you're saying you like musicals. I know that you are a singer performer a lot. A lot of the stuff I see on your Instagram is singing, which I admire deeply. I am from a family of musicians. My dad is a professional country musician, but I can't sing in front of people without melting into a ball of neuroses. That's hard to do.
Yeah, it is. I've been singing since, like, before I can even remember, and I've been studying classical music since I was 13, so
Mm.
I do a lot of, like, operas, I do a lot of musical theater, but I kinda sing a little bit of everything, like, I don't know, I can rock out some, like, Pat Benatar at karaoke, like, I make it work, but I love performing. I'm in a production of Little Shop of Horrors right now.
Mhm.
I'm gonna be in a production of American Psycho in a few
There's
months
a
in
production of
San
this?
Jose. Yes, it is a full musical written by, the Tony award-winning composer of, one of my favorite musicals is Spring Awakening,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
and then he wrote, American Psycho. It was on Broadway, and it flopped terribly, but the music is really interesting because it's all this, like, '80s, like, dark wave
Yeah.
synth. It's a really good entryway musical for, like, goth people, I feel like.
Yes.
And it weaves in all the elements that are really, famous from the movie, but also stuff from the book. So I'm playing a character who isn't in the movie, but is like from the book.
Mhm.
She's Evelyn slash Reese Witherspoon, if you've seen the movie, like her best friend. So I'm playing that character in a few months, and I'm really excited about it because I love horror and I love musicals, and I'm like, let's combine them. It's the same reason I like Sweeney Todd as well. It's like, you're crossing genres and trying new things out.
Yeah, I did not think that you could do it particularly well. I mean, the toe that I dipped into trying to figure that out the first time was with Repo the Genetic Opera, and
Oh my
yeah.
god, I remember that from high school. There's always, like, that one group of kids at the school who's, like, really into it and makes it their entire
Yep,
personality.
that if there isn't a bigger red flag on the world, let it be that.
my god, so
Like
real.
I would rather date a guy who's like, I think I really understand the Joker character or the main character from American
Oh my
Psycho. I'm like, I
god.
can work with that. I cannot save you from liking that movie. So I always thought like, wow, it just has to be so campy. It doesn't do justice to the genre.
So
Yeah,
real.
neither
No,
musical
really,
horror.
I lo yeah, that's so true. Yeah. And that's the thing is that it's just like with a lot of musicals, I feel
Mhm.
like it's like, people think of theater kids and they think of, people with the jazz hands and stuff. And there are some really good movie musicals like
Mhm.
Chicago, and I really like the Mel Brooks like producer, the
Yes.
old one and the
Yeah.
musical version of it. And that's great, but there's so much um there's so much out there that can really bridge genres and like really help with like expressing really it's more. I feel like movie musicals have a tendency to err more on the side of like opera
Mhm.
than they do actual like translation of like stage to screen.
Mhm.
That's why I think the Les Mis movie had a lot of issues in it
Mhm.
because it is such a like epic stage
Mhm.
production, and then you try and get up close and personal in their face and it doesn't like translate as well. But there are definitely some musicals where I feel like when you get a closer look at those characters and you can kind of get up close with them, it can be super effective.
Mhm.
Um, but I always really like all the classic stuff because, the MGM musicals and everything, they're just such a grand
Mhm.
spectacle. And I think that that's the thing that really drew me to film in the first place is I'm just like, I just want to see something crazy.
Mhm.
Like I want to see something that is like beyond my realm of like understanding of how they even pulled this off,
Mhm.
which s- so interesting that like I would be led to having my two favorite genres be horror and
Yeah. Uh-huh.
musicals because like I think that they're so opposite, but it really is about the spectacle and the
Mhm.
like how did they do that and the like, the stakes that it takes to, be daring in creating something like that because both genres have their fans and their
Yes.
haters very
Yes.
strongly, and I kind of like that they're both so divisive in that way.
Yes. And then I like that you get things like Little Shop of Horrors, where suddenly both fan groups are like, no, that's a masterpiece.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a gateway drug. It's
It
amazing. I know,
really
I've been
is.
having so much fun putting it on with my theater because, like, kids will come to the show and
Mhm.
the parents are like, "Should my children be watching this?" But ultimately, I think that that's good for kids.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like kids should be scared more,
Yes.
but in, like, but still in a way that is, like, not gonna be harmful to their
Yes.
psyche.
We were talking about this in the Goonies episode I did with Jared, where like it's still scary. There's still skeletons. There's still like risks and stakes and
Yeah,
things might go badly, and that's a more realistic environment for kids. Absolutely.
totally.
I also think that Little Shop of Horrors is just bound for greatness because it's Alan Menken. And
Oh,
like,
yeah.
so my friend is a composer who writes musicals, and she went to a workshop in let's say New York, I think it's Brooklyn or whatever, and she worked with him. He was her mentor.
With Alan
Hmm.
Menken?
And she's
Oh my
telling me
god.
this, and I'm like, oh, I'm not a musical person. I think I remember that guy. I know how I don't really like musicals, except for Little Shop of Horrors, and also I didn't totally mind The Little Mermaid, or like all that kind of stuff from that, and then I just proceed to list every Alan Menken thing that he has done for like the last 10 years.
You're a secret fan.
I didn't know he had a name.
Oh my god, that's so
It's
funny.
good shit, though. It's good shit. I mean, who among us cannot hear the Little Mermaid songs and not be like, it slaps. It gets in your brain.
It's so good. Like, we love an "I Want" song,
Hmm.
and it's beautiful.
So I'm getting really psyched because a lot of the stuff that you're saying here, I have like talking points for why I was
Ooh.
like, how can I get a person excited about Green Inferno? And I wrote these talking points, and you're hitting on all of them, which is great. I don't want to jump the
Oh, hell
gun. Let's phase into. Oh wait, I did want to ask. So how can I see this musical where you're in American Psycho? When is that? Because this is pre-recorded, so maybe if the timing lines up, how would somebody go get tickets to that?
Oh my God, absolutely. So, American Psycho is going to be debuting in San Jose. So, if you're in the Bay
Mhm.
Area, you should definitely come see it. It's with a theater company called the company is called Bad Musical Theater, but they're not bad. They're very good. And the reason that they're called bad is that it stands for Bay Area Diversity Musical Theater.
Ah!
Yeah, and so it's really great because we have a lot of just really interesting casting that is very inclusive of people of different genders and sexualities and
Awesome.
race, and, we've got a lot of neurodivergent performers and,
Mm.
disabled performers and just, people all across the spectrum and very intersectional kind of group of people. Literally the kindest callback I've ever been to in my whole life. Like, I knew I had to be in the show because I met the people and I was like, this is going to be such a joy to work with them.
Oh.
And they're all so talented, like incredibly. So the show is running at Stage One Creative Spaces in San Jose, and the shows run from July 12th to July 21st. And yeah, I'll be playing Courtney Lawrence in all of the shows. So come see me either weekend that it plays, and say hi to me after the show and tell me that you came from this podcast. I'll be really happy to see you.
Use the offer code bonkers at checkout to get a nice
I know.
firm
I was gonna say,
handshake.
if you hit me up on Instagram, maybe I'll get you a discount on tickets at Suburb Survivor.
Oh, yes, absolutely. All of this, of course, will be in the liner notes as well, but this will definitely come out with time for people to see that. It sounds so absolutely interesting. I wish I lived anywhere near the Bay Area. I think I might pay someone to go and then just tell me, like,
Oh my
like
God,
a
yeah, no,
surrogate.
seriously. Send all of your friends and fam. Like, it's going to be incredible.
Awesome.
I'm so excited for
That's
it.
exactly the kind of theater that I get excited about too. So it's a joy to vicariously live through you on that. As we move forward, I have kind of fallen into this thing where I'm trying to get an idea of what the guests are like as moviegoers, and I know that Movie Night Extravaganza accidentally fell into doing their movie night Letterboxd one-liners, and I didn't realize that I also have fallen into doing Letterboxd top four. I've just been asking people for their top three, and then everybody keeps going, "Oh, can I go four? Because I just need one more." And I'm like, "I guess we're doing it. What's your Letterboxd
Heck
top
yeah.
four?"
My Letterboxd top 4 changes a lot,
Okay.
but I'm solid on my top 4 right now. So my number 1 film of all time is Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring. I like the whole trilogy, but The Fellowship of the Ring just really just sets up that world so beautifully. It's also like the first time when I watched that movie, I was 10. I watched that movie in theaters and I was just like I I felt depressed afterward that I couldn't live there. Like, I was like, "This is cinema." Like, I really felt like that just like that escapism.
Mhm.
I'm obsessed. So, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, forever my number 1 darling.
Absolutely. I mean, my honeymoon, I went to New Zealand and I went to Hobbiton because I wanted to live in that movie.
Oh my God, I'm so jealous. I wanna go so, so badly, and to all the filming locations that they do in the southern part of the island with, like, where the Riders of Rohan are. Like, I gotta take that trip in my lifetime. It's like a holy pilgrimage for me.
Absolutely worth it. I also got to have lunch with a member of the All Blacks, who took us horseback riding, and his teacup chihuahuas chased behind us through the bush as he told us
Stop!
about working on that movie because he also worked with the horses on that movie.
Oh my
It's
God. Oh,
magical.
I would cry. That's a
Magic. It
dream.
was all accidental too. Like we just found him in the phone book, and it's Horsome Trails, Horsome Trails written, and we didn't understand until he said, "Welcome to Horsome Trails." It sounds like awesome when they say it.
Oh, that's so funny. I love
Highly
that.
recommend.
That's
Highly
so cute.
recommend. So you are not
Oh my
alone. That
gosh.
is also on the top four for several of our other guests. Jared just put it in
Yes.
his top
It
four.
it's a wonderful one. And then yeah, and then the rest of my top 4, I have so Bringing Up Baby, which I brought before, my favorite, rom-com, and, another one that I have on my list, and I recommend it to everyone who is, like, really into, like, avant-garde stuff, is Funeral Parade of Roses. It's from Japan. It's very interesting. It's kinda half documentary, half narrative, and it explores the kind of, it explores gender and sexuality and just kind of living in Japanese society as a trans person.
Mm.
But it's from like the 1960s. It's super ahead of its
Wow.
time. And it tells this narrative story about this like gender queer person living in, in Tokyo. But then it will cut to like interviews with people in the cast and crew and ask them about their like feelings about gender, sexuality, like just life growing up as an adolescent in Japan. And I just think that it is the most interesting story structure, so ahead of its time, visually stunning, amazing performances. I highly recommend it if you want to watch something way out of the box.
I had never heard of it,
It's
but sounds so interesting.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then the last movie that I have on here, I always switch this one out between The Sound of Music and Almost Famous. And right now I have Almost Famous up there because it's the one that I just watched
Mhm.
recently. And I rewatched it and I was like, man, this movie slaps. Like it's just hit after hit. The needle drops, incredible. I love Penny Lane. I feel a kindred spirit with her. So yeah. So that's my top five or my top
Yeah.
four for right now.
Nice, nice. Top 5 because we know that Sound of Music is 5, so
Top five, Sound of
top
Music.
5, it's fine. That's really okay, that really gives me a very good idea. I like that. That's a thoughtful top 4 as well. Got to get the whole round.
Yeah,
I know whenever
it's very varied.
I try and do my top 4, I think, like, what represents me as a person more than, like, my absolute most favorite movie. Like, if you needed to understand whether or not I would like a movie, here's the speckling of what makes me a moviegoer. So I enjoy that. And there's a few on there I haven't seen, so now I've got some stuff to go on and watch.
Yeah.
So, as we're moving into this, let's just open it up with why why do you feel like you don't like Eli Roth or the genre that we're gonna, I guess, loosely use the term torture porn? Because in trying to research
Mhm.
this, I was trying to decide, is this body horror? And I got a really good answer, but we'll get to that. It's not body horror. It's its own thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
why isn't this your flavor?
I think it's when I was like a teenager, cuz I was born in 1990,
Mhm.
so I was like going through adolescence like in the 2000s, post 9/11, our media changed so much.
Mhm.
And I don't know, like, being a teenager, in a small town, like, there's nothing to do there except for to go bowling or go to the movie theater, but my movie theater didn't show any, like, kind of high art or anything like that. It was all, like, early 2000s, like, horror films, and I have my whole life struggled with massive fucking anxiety, like, next level anxiety, scared of everything. I grew up in a very sheltered household. I was really religious by choice, actually. People are like, "Oh, did your parents raise you really evangelical?" I'm like, "No, I became evangelical on my own, like just on my own because when I moved to the East Bay for middle school. From I lived in Seattle before that, and then when I moved to California, I had no friends. People were kind of standoffish, and I just didn't know how to make friends. So one girl was nice to me, and she invited me to her church youth group. And it was the first time that people were nice to me. So I decided that I was going to go all in on Jesus in order to like make friends. And then I just got really like hyped on like, eternal salvation and shit. So
Doesn't it all sound like a movie beginning to cult story?
I know, right? And that's the thing is that really kept me away from horror for a long time because it was like, oh, that's like the devil's media, right? And so there was a lot of this kind of this fear of getting into stuff that was too dark-sided that I thought would like potentially make me stray from my religious path. And then there was this other thing that was just my anxiety. And when I was trying to make friends with people, whether they were in my church or outside my church, we would all go to movies together and not behave. We're like running around the theater and just like, like making out with your little boyfriend in the back of the theater, like things like that. So we didn't go see a lot of movies that were particularly high art. If you go to my Letterboxd, my number one review is for Elektra because I saw that movie 10 times in theaters because it's the only thing to do in my town. And so I just kept going because I was like, I don't know where else to hang out with
Not
people.
even Daredevil.
But when yeah, it's like it was lame. But there were just so many times that people would invite me out to things like to go see Saw or Hostel or The Hills Have Eyes and things like that. And I would find myself like trying to suck it up because I wanted to like make friends. So I would like go into the theater and I just spend the entire time with my hands over my eyes, feeling like I'm gonna vomit, calling my mom to come pick me up because my anxiety was so high and I just felt like I was like, "Oh my gosh, like this can't be good for my
Mhm.
conscience and like this can't be good for like my mental health and my journey with God." Like it was like that deep. And so I just avoided horror altogether and I kind of gave myself this narrative that I hated all horror movies, whether it was super gory or whether it was, very jump scary or anything like that. Like I didn't want to have anything to do with any of it. And I didn't like fully immerse myself into, understanding the breadth of the horror genre until I was like in my mid
Mm.
20s, which is crazy. It's like 10 years of me
Mm.
completely avoiding it altogether because I was afraid it was going to trigger something in me that I didn't want to feel.
Well, I feel like that's all incredibly valid. I mean, you were given a lot of violent imagery without any context at all, and not
Yeah,
really
true.
consensually, and not really
Mhm.
shifting through because you're talking about a period in American horror when I guess we were probably most responsive to the anthrax issues and all of the like disease that
Mhm.
was going around. So you get stuff like well, Eli Roth's first film is Cabin Fever, and that's the one about
Mhm.
Ebola, and that had the really graphic, violent images, but without the context of knowing that that is a response to what is happening sociopolitically at the time and a larger metaphor. Those are just really horrible images, and
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
so interesting that we're like, oh yeah, teenagers go see horror movies. It's fine, but definitely keep them away from those, dramas. I wouldn't want them to see something really intense. And you're like, really?
God forbid they see gay people
God,
kissing like
yeah.
in a biopic, you
Yeah.
know?
Meanwhile, like watching any kind of movie where someone watches their significant other descend into Alzheimer's, I'm like, what? I don't need that burned in my brain, but I can look at like
Yeah.
any kind of thing coming out of another thing. I'm like, cool effects, because one is real and one is not.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that like also just being that age and like living such a sheltered experience, it was hard for me to even grasp that horror had meaning at all. Like or that it had any sort of metaphor. Like I think that I had fully in my mind just considered that it's just like it's just about the violence. It's just about the blood and it's just because some kids want to be edge lords and they think that this
Yes.
is cool. And I'm cooler than them because I'm above the influence or whatever narrative I was giving myself at the time. But it was like, yeah, I like didn't even think that there were metaphors. I didn't seek to understand it because I don't know. I don't know if I even really understood metaphors beyond like, I don't know, parables
Hmm.
that are, that are a little bit more whitewashed, you know?
Yeah, and definitely there is a tendency for men to use horror to put women in their place. So to want to exist as a woman in the horror genre, or to say that you even like horror movies as a woman, you kind of have to be willing to fight for it. And if you don't, why have that fight? Why exist in that realm at all? So it's easier to not watch them than to have to engage in that kind of like you're right, edgelord bullshit behavior where like, did that bother you? It didn't bother me. The filmmaker made it with the intent that it bother you. If it didn't bother you, they're pissed off and upset.
Yeah, that's true. And that is so interesting too, this kind of like gatekeeping that happens with men in horror because I do remember like every single time I would go to one of these movies, it was like with guys who I thought were my friends,
Mm.
and then, like, when they would see me kinda squirming in my seat, like, they would just continue to prod me on, like, "Oh, Lauren can't take the heat," and blah, blah, blah. It made me not wanna hang out with those guys. I never felt safe. I never felt safe watching the content, and I didn't feel safe with the people I was watching the movie with. But, you go over to your girlfriend's house and you're watching, like, cute little, rom-coms or whatever, that is a safe environment. So I'm like, "Okay, whatever the opposite of horror is, that's where I live,
Mhm.
and I don't need to go back there."
Uh-huh.
And that's why I was so closed off to it. It wasn't even just the content, it was, like, the culture that
Mhm.
was around it at the time of, like, "Oh, like, girls don't belong here, and if they think they belong here, let's make them like, really second guess even showing up." And that was such a weird
Yeah,
experience.
and let's make her the weak one of the pack to pick on. It's it's
Yeah.
also interesting that it wraps it up in kind of like a shameful thing. It's shameful for you to watch this because of your devout religion, because you don't
Mhm.
really understand or want to be watching this because they're making you feel shame that you don't like it as much as they do. And like I'm thinking about all of these things, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's how I feel when I watch a musical. That's absolutely how I feel like I watch a musical
Mm.
because I so, so got ripped into for my father for not being able to make music. I don't sing well and I don't know how to play an instrument.
Mm.
So I have this incredible shame when I watch people sing that I'm just like, oh no, their dad's gonna come out here and yell at them. And like, oh,
Oh,
okay,
so
I'm getting it.
wild.
Like it's hard to get over that, but if you do, there's some beautiful things within the genre, but it takes a damn ass long time to get over it.
Yeah. That is very interesting, the idea of just, like, avoiding just certain genres because of just, like, any shame. Because
Mhm.
I don't know, I always felt like I was just like, fear is a universal emotion, but, like, sometimes, like, the fear that you experience in horror isn't an actual, like, fear that's connected to, like, your root.
Mhm.
Your root can be shame around other things, and, that can be just as scary,
Mhm.
and it's kinda like what you were talking about with, like, real world problems that might connect to a little too much or feel really uncomfortable by, and how that might
Mhm.
manifest. Yeah, I never really considered that before. That's very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, and as I'm sitting here looking at my notes about the concept of these things, particularly it has its birth in body horror, and
Mhm.
body horror is really, really about like the dehumanization of your own body. Like you can't run away from this monster; it is yourself, and
Mhm.
it does wind up splintering into a section that becomes deeply about gender and deeply about women trying to like they get seen as objects and dehumanized so much that they then start fighting back. And that's when you get like
Mhm.
audition and you get like to a lesser degree promising young woman.
Yeah.
But as women as well, it's hard for us to watch the pre-birth like these subgenres outside of it. You're like, yeah, well, body horror is deeply objectifying and dehumanizing, and our day to day is kind of dehumanizing and objectifying. And I'm with people
Mhm.
who dehumanize me and objectify me and make me feel uncomfortable. Why am I doing this?
Yeah, that's such a good point because I think when I did finally start to accept like horror as a part of, something that I was really like that I found empowering, it was when I was watching things like Suspiria or Ginger Snaps
Mhm.
or like Jennifer's Body, like when they are like
Yeah.
more women driven, I do feel that connection. I feel like that kind of helped to let me in and really did heal a lot of the wounds that I had when I would think about, women being dismembered or tortured or like any of those things that I had to put up with, when I was dragged there by like, my guy friends in middle school. And it was the female driven horror that really like helped me to see that there was another way and another lens to
Mhm.
like view the genre. And then I was able to kind of start looking at the genre as a whole. But yeah, it does always kind of come back to gender for me and kind of taking back that power.
Mhm.
Because the thing about Christianity, not to make this a religious podcast,
Hey.
but one of the things that I like really kind of because I wouldn't consider myself Christian anymore. I wouldn't consider myself religious, but I do think that Christianity did a lot of really good things for
Mm.
me, but it also did a lot of really damaging things for me in terms of like the way that I view my own body and my autonomy and my agency. And it's stuff that, you know, now that I'm in my mid 30s, like I'm still unpacking that, and it's been, you know, 20 years.
Mhm.
And so I, you know, I find that when I am given these narratives where it's like, you know, there is this metaphor for oppression, and you watch someone, you know, physically manifest defeating this monster that is like this oppression, that feels good, and that feels calming to me in some way, but I don't but it's so hard for me to lump in other things like, you know, the green well, I haven't seen the Green Inferno yet,
Mhm.
but things in that sort of genre, like, it's hard for me to justify it because I'm like, "Where am I going to find any agency or autonomy in this? Where is this going to come back around to me as an empowering story
Mhm.
that's gonna make me feel okay after watching it and not like trigger very old wounds?"
Yeah.
And that's why I've just kind of avoided it even though I've explored all the other corners of horror. I can't get to this one. And I've even explored some body horror too, like, I really like Cronenberg stuff. Like,
Absolutely.
Cronenberg is great. So it's like I'm getting there,
Mhm.
but it's been a very slow process, and I think that when it comes back to it, it is really about, you know, am I gonna watch people lose their agency? Am I gonna watch people lose their autonomy? Because that is too personal to
Mhm.
me.
Mhm. This is a really interesting question because I only recently came around to feeling like I even understood what Eli Roth was trying to do, let alone feeling like I could be the kind of person who would be like, "No, I'm going to defend him," because I obviously I call it torture porn, so I don't hold very much reverence for it. And I remember
Mhm.
seeing Hostel in theaters and just generally being like, "Who the hell is that for? And what the fuck did I just watch?"
Yeah. I had the same reaction, like,
Mhm.
I was forced to watch Hostel. I remember someone trying to, like, literally force my eyes open
Mhm.
because they're like, "You're a baby if you don't watch this." I'm like, "Nobody should watch this." Like, nobody should watch
And for
this.
me, I had seen Cabin Fever and very much enjoyed it. Very much got the message, like really it hit with me, and the special effects, the use of practical special effects were astounding. The way that it wound up becoming like you're afraid of the flesh-eating virus, but the reality is you need to be afraid of all of your own stupid ass human nature. Like you idiots are the reason you
Mhm.
died. And I like this thing that it's called contrapasso. Are you familiar with contrapasso?
No, what is this?
It is one of the major tenets of hell in Dante's Inferno. It's a tenet that every single sinner has to be punished in a way that is equal to their sin. So, for example,
Mm,
they put like astrologers and sorcerers and heretics, so like any kind of magician or false prophet in the eighth circle of hell, and they turned their heads backwards. They broke their necks and turned their heads backwards so that when they walked backwards because they could not see what was in front of them because they were lying about
mm,
the future to begin with. So like that kind of like
mm,
you in as much as we have human like not fate but free will, like as if we're talking Christianity here, like the difference between us
mhm,
and angels is that we have this whole awesome free will thing, and that can kind of help us make a life on earth. That also flips over in hell where like, well, you chose to live this way, so you're choosing
mm,
this thing that has to happen to you because you can't just be an absolute shit and die and that's it. Like something has to happen to make it fair, to
yeah.
make it
There
level.
has to be some sort of, like,
Mhm.
retribution, for your actions. Yeah, that's super interesting.
The OCD person in me is like, it's a version of putting everything where it belongs. Like you can jumble everything during the story, but at the end you have to put everything back where it belongs. And so I really like body horror for that reason. For a lot of that kind of
Mhm,
like, it usually has this sort of going back to that.
mhm.
But it doesn't always have that. And when it doesn't, it feels purient as fuck. And it is very hard to put a finger on why and when. And so I was looking into how to describe Eli Roth's style, because everybody's like, no, it's really kind of his own thing. And the best description of it is body horror, Cronenberg, mixed with early Wes Craven, and then mixed with the gore of Evil Dead, because it's often quite funny a little bit as well. And then mixed with the kind of like crazy special effects of Romero.
I like that. And that's the thing, is that I like all of those things individually. So I don't know why this like has really just kept me from really diving into Eli Roth stuff, because all of those things individually I really like.
But it can be too much. You could overspice anything, right?
Yeah, true.
What I really like about Green Inferno, and something that I haven't truly come to appreciate until like the last couple of years, is the way in which he uses the comedy.
Mhm.
Is the way in which, because like you're scared, it's gross, it's horrible, and then it's a little funny, so you kind of relax,
Mhm.
and then you get back in, and so there's like this shifting instead of it just being horrible the whole time. And I remember watching Hostel and thinking like, this was just horrible the whole time. I never found any
Mhm.
breathing space. I never wanted to exist in this world. And like, I think he as a director sometimes doesn't totally hit his own style.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's really important to have breathing room and some sort of catharsis, even if your ending doesn't end up all wrapped up in a bow, that's fine for me, but like give me like a moment for my heart rate to go down. And I feel like there are so many movies that like I was just like my heart doesn't get a break. So I feel like it really triggers my fight or flight response in a way that I'm just like, this isn't sustainable, therefore it can never be enjoyable. And that's how I felt watching Hostel as well.
Yeah. It there's a relentlessness to the genre of body horror. Like if you watch I guess if you watch The Fly, which I feel like is a very watchable body horror.
I just watched The Fly last year, I think,
Mhm.
and I really enjoyed it. Like it's gross, but like I really really enjoyed it because yeah, there's just it's so absurd.
It's also the most romantic horror movie I've like, it's so romantic. It's so tragically
I
romantic.
can see that. No, really.
For real. So yeah, you could take something like that and it is almost relentless, because it just keeps getting worse. The whole concept with body horror
Mhm.
is the inevitability of your own body failing. Like Cronenberg started making movies after he watched his mother die of cancer.
Mhm.
So like he watched this body fail on this person, and it becomes a major theme in what he does. And so for every body horror, it's an inevitable bad ending, because you can't ever get away from that. You can't cheat time or death. This will come and get us all. And I think that is also a reason why a lot of people are like, I don't want that. I don't want to know that. I don't want to look at that. I find it very uncomfortable. And I myself wonder, like, do you feel like there's any value in spending time in thinking those kinds of thoughts?
Yeah. That's a really, really good analysis of it, because I've been always a little bit on the macabre side, even as, like, a little kid, like, just a little bit on it, because I also, I had grandparents that were in nursing homes, and I would go visit them in nursing homes, like, when I was very young, and I was just constantly surrounded by, like, sick, dying people, but the way that my parents always kind of, described it to me, and my parents weren't necessarily super religious, like I said, I, like, chose that path on my
Mhm.
own, but, my mom's, like, a Christmas and Easter Christian, my dad's, like, a failed Catholic who ended up studying transcendental meditation and doing that sort of spiritual realm, but, like, the way that they always kind of, I guess, taught me about death is that they're like, "Well, death is an inevitability, and the best thing that we can do is try to make it as comfortable as possible for, when people inevitably reach the end of their journey." And in the last, like, decade of my life, I've been diagnosed with, like, a bunch of different things. So, like, I have a thyroid disorder, so I have organs that are failing, and I have fibromyalgia, so it's like I'm constantly in a state of, at least some level of pain. Like, on a scale I posted about this on Instagram the other day. It's like, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like, "Send me to the ER," and 1 being like, "I don't notice anything at all." I am always at about a 6 or a 7 on a normal day. On a bad day, I'm usually like an 8, sometimes I'm a 9, and on my best day ever, in the last 10 years, I've been a 4. So in the last 10 years, I haven't had a single day that has been pain-free. And living with that kind of constant discomfort and wondering, when I wake up in the morning, am I going to be able to put on my pants? Am I going to be able to, sit through this meeting and not, feel like I'm living in a cloud, like, some sort of brain fog? Like there are so many different things that I have to consider now with like a disabled body that I didn't think about that when I was a teenager. Those things didn't really like resonate with me.
Mhm.
Now that I am older and I have to contend with all of these different things that are happening to me personally, and also to contend with aging and the realization that someday I will die, I'm like more at peace. You'd think that I would be more concerned about it because it's like I'm edging toward that, but I have so much more peace about it because I'm like, well, this is what it is. This is the cards that I've been dealt. This is just what it's gonna be. And I find some catharsis in being able to just sit with the fact that I'm like, well, I guess this is happening. Which, yeah. But when I was younger and I was, able-bodied and I didn't have a care in the world and I was like very far from watching myself fall apart, it didn't even register for me. So now when you talk about body horror in this way, I'm like, that is very relatable. And maybe that's why I find peace watching horror now as opposed to when I was younger and I was scared of the very things that are happening to me right now. So it's a fascinating way to look at it.
It's interesting. I often find that you can find out a lot more about yourself or another person by talking about horror stories or talking about these uncomfortable stories than you can for talking about like what movie made you cry, which is an extreme emotion. Like we could go over and
Mhm.
just toss in rom-coms, but like no, let's toss in a higher fighter, a bigger fighter, people who are going to come in and be like, no, crying movies are the best. Like I don't know. I feel like it's very easy as an actor, both of us. I
Mhm.
feel like I can get another person to cry 5 minutes, super fucking easy.
Yeah.
Try and scare them? God bless you. I need like several mirrors a day, prosthetics, got a pump for the blood. Like,
Mhm. Yeah, and everyone like has fears that just hit them so differently. Like it's sometimes I'll talk to people about horror films, people who say that they don't like horror films. And I'm like, "Well, what do you not like about it?" And people will say, "Well, I don't like to be scared." I'm like, "Well, what do you not like to be scared of? Is it the jump scare or are you scared of like home invasion? Like, are you scared of monsters? Like, are you scared of the death itself? Are you scared of the blood? Like, what is it? When you get down into those specifics, everyone just has such a it's like a fingerprint. Everyone's is so
mhm,
different. And I've not met like I meet people all the time, for example, like I'm really scared of needles. I've never liked needles. I find them very
mhm,
invasive. It comes back to this whole like bodily autonomy and me not having agency sort of thing. Feels like people are taking something from me when they're taking my
mhm,
blood. And so I really hate needles. I'll meet other people who hate needles, but they don't hate needles in the way that I hate needles,
mhm,
and they don't have the same reason
mhm,
why. Like, for them, just they don't like the poke.
mhm.
For me, it's that I don't like the
Oh,
taking.
that's
And everyone is just a little bit different in that way, which I find very interesting. So, to be able to kinda understand
mhm,
how do you scare someone, you have to, like, really go deep into someone's psyche and spend a considerable amount of time in those dark places to be able to even pull that out of somebody.
mhm. You have to go to a pretty far extreme, and I feel like that is definitely what Eli Roth does.
Mhm.
He so as we were talking earlier, so many horror movies have people who watch them and say like, didn't bother me," or like, "I barely screamed." And yet Eli Roth is constantly trying to be like, "Look away. Did you have to look away? Did I make something that was so upsetting for you to look at that you looked away? Good, because this
Mhm.
is horrible." And it's
Yeah.
like I said earlier, like, that's their intention. They want you to be upset. They
Mhm.
don't want you to be able to look at it.
Yeah.
It's horrific.
Yeah.
Ugh. So I'm gonna ask you a totally almost non sequitur, but we'll get back to how it makes a sense in a second. How do you feel about the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
Oh my god. So it's my brother's favorite show in the whole world, and I I am so mixed on it. There are times when I watch that show and I'm just like, "This show is so funny." But also, I find that show horrific because I know that there are fans of it who identify with those characters, and those people scare the fuck out of
Yes.
me. So it's not even like the show itself bothers me, it's the fans of the show. I'm like, if you tell me your favorite character is Dennis, stay the fuck away from me. Like
Yeah, yeah.
itself I find really funny because it is like shining a light on like, you know, the worst of humanity. And it's also the same reason that I like Seinfeld, which I
Yes.
think is kind of in its way always sunny light.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I like a complicated ensemble cast, but I don't always like the things that people get out of those sorts of situations. So yeah, so that's why I mixed it.
That is so interesting. I I love when the show itself has a different feel than the fans.
Yeah, it's so true.
It's like for me, I have never seen any episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer except for Hush, where no one talks because no one talks.
Oh,
And it's a good
my
episode. Good
favorite.
episode. I will admit, very good
Very
episode.
good.
But I
Yeah.
haven't because I find people who make Buffy the Vampire Slayer their number one, the television show, their number one personality trait, insufferable.
It's so true. I also feel that way about people who like Firefly, even though Firefly is objectively really good. I'm like, I get it. Firefly is awesome. You're correct. I don't want to hear about
You
it.
cannot die on that hill. So yeah, oh man, it's Always Sunny is like Seinfeld if they just admitted that everyone is an asshole and shit doesn't work out for them because like shit
Exactly.
always works out for George and it shouldn't. Well, it's like more the Larry
Mhm.
Sanders show that doesn't totally work out for him, and I like that. I like seeing characters who shouldn't succeed fail.
Yeah, I
And that
love
is
that.
definitely a large part of my enjoyment for Green Inferno is because you are given a story perhaps without protagonists. And I think that can people can struggle with that. Especially I think a lot of horror movies don't always, unless we're talking about slasher genre, have a protagonist. Like it's a Hamlet situation. You don't fall in love with everybody. You can't. It's not gonna end well.
Yeah, it is very interesting how it's like, in my top 4 is like Lord of the Rings, which is so cut and dry in its heroes and
Mhm, mhm.
villains. And made a huge impact on me as, like, a very young person. And as I get older, I find myself, like, while those things really still hold nostalgia for me and, like, I really like the, heroes and villains story that they have there, I like more complicated people
Yeah.
and complicated characters,
Mhm.
and I do really enjoy a comeuppance.
Yeah.
I think especially, like, in the last like 10 years as just like so much of the world has gone to shit and I just am watching like the haves and the have-nots like that widen and that split. I fucking love a comeuppance. I love a justice where it's not necessarily like good triumphs over evil, but it's like you know if you think that you're doing the right thing, but actually what you're doing has a net negative on the world, and then you finally have to look at that mirror that shows that you're not actually as fucking great as you think you are, I do really love that. And so when you were like, "You'll love Green Inferno for that reason," I was just like, "You might be right." Because I love a
Yeah.
comeuppance. I really do.
It's like have you seen the Japanese horror film Audition? Very hard watch. I might yeah.
Yes. I love Audition, even though I'm really scared of
Yeah,
needles. I
that's
really
why
do
I
like Audition.
literally and I also love that the Japanese word for deeper, deeper is, homonographic for kitty, 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 kitty. So she's putting the nails in, kitty, 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 kitty. It's a very upsetting scene. So I would have
Yeah.
understood if you had not seen it. But, he does something very shitty. He makes her audition. He has an audition for who's gonna be his significant other. But that's just one transgression on her. And yet she goes
Mhm.
ham on him for all of the transgressions that have ever been done to any woman ever. And as a viewer, you're
Mhm.
just like, fuck yes. And it
I
feels so
love a
good.
female rage.
I love a female rage. So there's some good body horror female rage movies
Mhm.
when a plan comes together like that. So as we move towards the end of this part of the show, we'll break and then you're going to watch the movie. I asked these two questions. Is there something that you are worried might happen or might exist and you might wind up seeing, and something that you're kind of like, oh, I hope they do this?
I think so. I think what I'm scared of is kind of what I was talking about before, where it's like, I don't want to have to watch the movie with my hand over my eyes. I
Mm,
don't want, because I feel like if it's too horrific, if it's too gory, if it's too bleak, I don't want the visual of it
mm,
to trigger one, those old wounds from when I was a little kid and remind me of every traumatic experience I had in a theater
mhm,
where I was,
mhm,
like, forced into watching something that I knew wasn't gonna be good, like, sitting in my brain. So that
mhm,
is primarily what I'm scared of. I know that Eli Roth is known for, he does not hold back with the spectacle, and like I was saying, like, I like a spectacle, but I don't know, because of my very, like, shallow experience with his past works, I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of spectacle. So that's what I'm most scared of. But what I am really excited about is, there is a deeper metaphor there. I know that there is.
mhm,
I'm excited to learn about who these characters are and see if it, like, holds up a lens
mhm,
to how I feel about society, because I think that that's what has really driven me to find this love in horror over the last few years, is just, like, really finding, holding up a lens to society and seeing the good, bad, and ugly parts of it,
mhm.
and evaluating. Also, I live in Santa Cruz, California. I I hate a hippie. I hate a hippie. I hate them.
Bless you, you're gonna
And
enjoy
and
this.
and it's not because I sit on the conservative side of things, and it's not because I don't think that climate change isn't real, and it doesn't, and it's none of those things.
Mhm,
It's literally like, it's the fake progressive performative
mhm,
allyship.
mhm.
I hate watching people, yell at me for using a plastic straw that I sometimes really need to drink from because, like, I have a disability.
Accessibility, yeah.
But then it's like they'll yell at me about a fucking plastic straw, but then they won't vote yes on rent control. Like,
The
it's really,
hypocrisy.
like, I die,
Yeah.
like, a little bit every day living in this community of, like, performative allyship, and I know that, from the very little that I know about this movie,
Mhm.
I know that that is, like, a common
Yes.
theme of, like, these hippies go out into the rainforest to go save the rainforest. I'm like, "Wow, sounds like all of Santa Cruz." And if I could get a catharsis of watching all of Santa Cruz just, like, understand
Mhm.
that they're, what they think is, like, good and noble, like, may not be so.
Might actually be kind of disgusting.
Yeah, then I feel like I will walk away being like, "Good for them." You know?
Oh, bless their hearts.
Yeah, I hate a hippie.
It's
Yeah.
no, I wish there was a term for the performative version of hippie because I
Yeah.
am in a part of Western Massachusetts that we delightfully refer to as behind the tofu curtain.
Oh, I love that.
That's how much hippitude we have here, and sometimes it gums up things in ways where like you can't even, like, I'm from New York City and I'll be like stuck behind a traffic jam because there's people protesting the local creamery's ice cream day because they don't believe that humans have the right to take the milk from cows that is meant for their babies. So they're all dressed up like little baby cows screaming, "How dare you take my milk?" And I'm just like, I just need to get something from Target.
It's true. It becomes like an annoyance with no call to action. It turns you off from all the issues. And that's the big thing that I, like, have a lot of issues with, is, like, I feel like there's just so much, and I see it on social media especially all the time now, like, just a lot of people wanting to be like, "Look how horrible the world is. We have to do something." I'm like, "Okay, what are you doing about it?"
Too bad, yeah.
They don't have an answer. They're not donating their time, they're not donating their money, they're not flying to these areas or worse, they are flying to those areas thinking that they're helping, and then they cause more damage. That's a thing I also got from Christianity. Bunch of people going off for mission trips to go build houses in Mexico. The minute that they leave, the Mexican people tear down those houses. They're not structurally safe. It's a fucking safety violation
Oh my God.
everywhere because you have teenagers building not structurally sound homes. They have no construction experience. So literally it's like you go down there, you think that you're like saving the Mexicans, and then the Mexicans are like, wow, really glad that we gave those white people that experience. Okay, everyone tear it down and rebuild actual houses. Like, it is insane, the performative, like, mission work that happens there. I've always felt weird about it, even when I was the most involved in my church. I'm like, "I don't think I can build a house. I don't think I can dig a well. I don't think that I'm, like, good at, like, teaching English to orphans." Like, it's like, I'm not qualified, but there are certainly a lot of people out there that want to feel qualified, and so they
Yes.
do the thing, and in doing so, they feel great about it, but they've actually done nothing. And then they get their little gold star with God, and then they move on with their life like, "Okay, well, like, there you go, I got my little badge."
It almost becomes like a Weight Watchers thing where like, well, now that I've done this nice good thing, I can do one bad thing. Like I can have chocolate.
Oh my god, yes! Yes. No, that's so true. Ugh, yeah.
Ah,
It's rampant, and I never understood it, and, like, yeah, it's wild because my whole life I've known, like, the values that I carry with me and the values that I don't carry with me, and sometimes when I meet people who I think have the same values as me, but then I find the way that they're going about it, I'm just like, "Oh, I don't know if you actually believe this."
mhm.
Which is always a very interesting thing. And then that gets me questioning, well, do I actually believe this? And then I end up going down a whole spiral about my whole worldview. And then I'm like, fuck it, I'm smoking weed and watching Seinfeld. So like
Yeah, that's what
it's
I was alluding to with the like are these the questions that are worth asking ourselves? Are they safe
Mhm.
to ask ourselves? And I firmly believe that they are because you get people who so don't ask them themselves these questions at all that to even crack open the door freaks them out and they have full panic attacks. But to kind of
Mhm.
like it's almost like when you have post-traumatic stress disorder and they do the EMDR and they kind of like
Mhm.
give you little doses of it over and over again until you microdose it and it doesn't bother you anymore and you can remember it and not go into a full panic. I feel like that is why
Mhm.
I come to horror. I need these microdoses so that I don't because I also have an anxiety disorder, but I also have
Mhm.
ADHD, so I have to have Adderall in my life. I can't. Uh,
Same.
so to microdose those kinds of things for me puts me in a perspective of being like, oh, okay, well, nobody's eating my face off right now. Remember that? That was crazy. So, even though I never had a dog eat my face off, I did see that movie and I didn't look away. Actually, so whenever somebody tells me that there's something they're worried about, I like to give them a little crutch to try and like anchor themselves should that come to fruition. And I thought about what Tom Savini, the like special effects mastermind, what he said of how he came to making special effects, which is that he had to serve in Vietnam, and his way of dealing with seeing all of the horrific mutilation and bloodshed was that he thought, okay, that's what that would look like if I had to make that into a prosthetic leg. That, okay, right there, that's how that would break apart. And so when I watch movies like this, I often think of myself going, oh man, okay, so that's how special effects did that. They did a look at that. The silicone is jiggling exactly like human flesh, and we know it's not.
Yeah. That stuff just, like, boggles my mind. And what I used to look away from, and what I often still look away from, sometimes I'll just, like, do a little peek and I'm like, "Ooh,
Oh yeah.
ooh." And so it's why I like movies with, like, a lot of stylistic, like, really saturated blood. It's why I like Argento stuff so much.
Mm,
I'm like, "Ooh, that blood is very saturated."
yes.
I don't know if real blood actually looks like that, but, like, it's like, to me, it looks more like a painting than it does like actual blood.
Hmm.
So when you get into the really, really good stuff where it's like, it looks really real, it is very disturbing for me, but also I understand what you're saying about kind of like microdosing that horror and until it doesn't affect you as
Hmm.
much. And maybe that's something that I like need to do
Hmm.
because then it will help me to overcome you know, the anxiety that I feel about, you know, I don't know, just like torture, gore, dehumanization,
Mm-hmm.
loss of autonomy. Like, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
it could be therapeutic for me, but I wouldn't know because I haven't I haven't touched it. So, now you've got me thinking that I'm like, "Oh, maybe I could watch this movie and then talk to my therapist about it."
Yeah, yeah, you probably will. Yeah, you probably will. I also think it's very interesting that you comment on the saturation because feel like we're living in this like last 2 decades of everything being color corrected heavy blue.
Oh my gosh, I know, and everything is really dark.
It's at the cost of red. So we're not getting that
Yeah,
saturation of blood in a lot of things that we watch. So when
yeah.
you watch like Dario Argento, it's just truly like, "Oh my god, am I tripping?"
Yeah, it really does feel psychedelic and
Mhm.
it's something that I really like about it. And also, you know, what drew me to watching Tarantino's
Mhm.
movies when I thought that I didn't want to watch anything with violence, and then I watched these like ultra
Mhm.
violent things that he created, and I'm like, "Oh, but it's so pretty." Like the violence is pretty.
Did you see Mandy?
I did see Mandy and I loved it.
That's
I
yeah,
loved
okay. It's
Mandy.
very pretty violence, very Dario Argento
Yeah.
colors. It's yeah, this is all
Yeah.
making sense. And the other thing I would
Yeah.
tell you is the woman who is playing the main character is married to Eli Roth now. I believe that they were engaged while this was doing. So if I watch this movie, I often have a thought of like, "Aw, like, honey, just get in there. No, just come on. It's okay."
That's so cute.
Like some of the scenes are
I
real
think that it
intense.
would be very romantic to be on a horror movie set with, like, the person that you love, and, like, because that's, like, so vulnerable to see the person that you love in those kinds of situations, like, so to be able to kinda push through and, like, make it look as real as possible, like, that takes some balls, and I, like, respect that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, a little bit of the like, oh, it's a fake limb. And I'm like, oh, they were so in love. I have like my Linda Bell term. Oh, they were so in love, Bobby. Like, what movie am I watching?
Oh my god. No, I love that.
All right. Anything you want to say before we go and let you watch the movie?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I'm less scared now. I'm actually pretty
Yeah.
excited. I think it's gonna be a fun romp. I also like I'm excited to see Eli Roth not in hostile mode.
Yes.
And not in Bear Jew mode.
Although I loved him in that
Although
mode.
I prefer Eli Roth the Bear Jew, but I'm very excited to see what he brings to this, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe it'll end up being really cathartic. So I'm
Yeah,
excited.
yeah, absolutely. And, you can always watch it during the day, watch it in breaks, and take it apart however you need to. There's no reverence. And if you don't wind up liking it, you don't have to. There's no no aspersions. I won't be like, oh, so offended.
I'm stoked, and I appreciate your suggestion,
Mhm.
and I feel like we're really working through something deep
Stuff's coming up. Yeah,
together.
for both of us. Like, oh god,
We're go
that's why I
this
don't like
this
musicals.
trauma is gonna bring us closer together.
That's how every horror movie should. It should bring you closer together.
Hell yeah, I love
All
it.
right. See you on the other side, guys.
Yeah, on the other side.
This corporation, measuring the indigenous tribes of the Peruvian Amazon, is about to shoot a girl whose father works at the United Nations. The United Nations!
Kill her! See what happens!
All right, we are back from the break with Lauren. We have both just seen, me again and her for the first time, Eli Roth's Green Inferno.
Oh my god.
You,
Oh my god. Oh my god.
we were both saying that we have a lot of notes. A lot of notes. I'm going to try and keep my note shuffling noises to a minimum, but yeah, lots to say.
So much, so much. I will say I was like, I told you I was going to watch this film with my spouse who is like totally fine with like a lot of different like violence, gore, whatever, like nothing really shakes them. And they know that I'm like way more anxious, and so I was like, okay, well, I can't watch this like without you. And they were like, oh my god, no, like they were looking forward to it all week. They were like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, I'm so ready, I'm so ready, I'm so ready. And then when we finally watched the movie, and they were pretty like they're pretty unshakable. And this time around, they were like, "Oh damn." Like, "Oh damn." Like the whole time, and they were like watching me watch it. And I was, yeah, I mean, there were times I was doing okay, and then there were times when I was like, I gotta pause. I gotta take a beat. I gotta get a sip of water. I'm dizzy. I'm nauseous. Like, I needed to take actual breaks. It
Yes,
was intense.
absolutely. What if I told you that Eli Roth was he said he came back, so he had taken a break from directing films to go and be an actor. And this film gets made by him as his return back to directing. And he has just done Inglorious Bastards, which is why
Mhm.
there's the Brad Pitt labeled trolley in
Yeah.
the first scene. That's in the in the credits. It says special thanks to Brad Pitt, both the motor car and the actor,
Oh my god, that's so funny.
because they work together so closely. He said he wanted to go for something that would be considered dangerous filmmaking. That was
Mhm.
almost like when Werner Herzog made Fitzcarraldo and harkened back
Mhm.
to the like Italian cannibal films like Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah, yeah, and I thought that that was very interesting because I was just like, it definitely, like, feels very modern, but I could see the Easter eggs that were in it,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I always appreciate when, like, a filmmaker, likes to harken back to stuff from the past, and I was like, "Okay, I can, like, clearly see where a lot of this." I was totally getting Fitzcarraldo from it too, and
Yeah.
also, Wrath of God, and I was like, "Okay."
Mm.
Can tell when somebody, even if they're going in a completely different direction with it, they really know their cinema, and I, like, really appreciated that about it, and some of the ways that he even shot certain things, I think were, like, harkened back to a lot of kinda old things as well, so I thought that was really fascinating.
Yes, absolutely. And he's going for a style that's I mean, I myself have not been able to sit through all of Cannibal Holocaust. I don't know if there's a lot of redeeming. That's it's too much for me.
Yeah.
But, he's trying to use that inspiration in a more palatable way, but still definitely his desire is for you to want to look away. I mean, we're talking about body horror, definitely. And this body horror is constantly trying to remind you that even though you yourself are sentient, you are still meat.
Mhm. Also, I wanna just, shout out appreciation for the tribe for seasoning the meat before they cooked it. They really put on, like, a solid layer of salt, and I was like, "Oh, they understand the flavor." Like, they're good I was like, not only are they, like, they're cooking the meat, yes, for sustenance, but they're also really going for flavor, so I respect them for that.
Yes, it is truly only white people who do not spice.
True.
The tribe themselves, I'm gonna try and pronounce it, the Kalanyaku tribe is a
Mhm.
real Peruvian tribe that exists in the Amazon. This film was shot further in the Amazon than any other film at the time. The
Wow.
tribe themselves could only get to other tribes by canoe, and when they came to ask them if it would be okay to shoot there, they had to kind of explain what films were because they hadn't seen a film yet, but they were
Mhm.
storytellers, so they were like, "Oh, yeah, we totally get it." And Eli Roth was like, "I think we should show them a film so that they get what we're going for, because I don't want them to not understand what I'm asking them to take part in."
What did he show
Cannibal Holocaust.
them? Okay. Oh,
They thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. They were like,
no.
"This shit is hilarious. You son of a bitch, sign me up."
Oh my god, no way. That's their first film, and then they just start with that.
And they're just like,
Holy
"Yo, this is hilarious. Let's do it. Let's do this." And so in the scenes
wow.
where they're seasoning the meat as you're describing, he literally said to them, like, "Just treat it like it was any meat that you had slaughtered yourself. Just cook it the way you would have cooked it." So yeah, that is them just being like, "This is how we would cook meat, man."
Wow. I love that so much.
Yeah.
That's wild.
You could kinda see it in the takes where the kids are pulling people apart, like, they've got a little bit of the FX stuff in their mouth, and their smiles are so curled. They're having such a good time. Actually, they said the kids kept getting involved in the actual filmmaking and wanting to see the, like, dailies and the turnarounds and trying to be part of the crew and everything. It was,
That's
yeah,
so cute. I know
pretty
that's actually
endearing.
something I, like, really appreciated about the kid actors in this movie. I remember The biggest thing that Mac and I were like, this is awesome, was like when the girl starts to have diarrhea and all the kids are like laughing at the fart jokes. And I was just like, oh my God, literally fart jokes and poop jokes truly unite the world. Um, and they were the most egregious shitting sounds I've ever heard in my whole life. And I was like, yeah, if I was a kid on this set, I would be laughing too. Like, it's hilarious.
It's the incredible extremes to which everything is done at the point in which
Mhm.
we're in the village. It's not any one particular aspect of the horror.
Yeah.
The scene with the snake where they're throwing the snake at the actress,
Mhm.
the kids came up with that. They were like, "Oh, we get it. So, like, we're having this it's kinda funny and we're kinda would it be cool if we, like, threw a fake snake at her?"
Oh my god.
And he was like, "Sure, let's shoot it. Fine. Yeah, of
Oh
course."
my god, I love that they were really involved in this process. Like,
Mhm.
that actually makes me feel really good, because I know that there was a lot of, like, controversy about, like, you know, the depiction of, like, indigenous tribes, especially uncontacted tribes, in these remote areas, to know that this was, like, a real tribe who, like, invited the filmmakers in and, like, wanted to be a part of the process, like,
Mhm.
makes me feel much better about it, because, of course, me having, like, feelings about, I'm are are these people being depicted? Like, is this okay? Like, I
Mhm.
was constantly asking
Of
myself being like,
course.
"Is this okay? Like, is this okay for me to be, like, watching? Is this okay for me?" And then I was just like, "Well, it's not like he forced these people to be on set, so I'm sure that, like, there is some level of education that's happening, behind the scenes, whatever." And to know how much the people were involved,
Mhm.
like, makes me feel really good. That's
Oh,
really
yeah.
um
It was incredibly thoughtful. In fact, there was a bunch of controversy where a few like different groups protested the film and said that, of course, like it sends a stereotype that unfound tribes are cannibals and all of this like
Mhm,
really inappropriate stereotyping.
totally.
And Eli Roth's response to that was, "You guys didn't see the movie to the extent that you didn't see the credits where we say." There are groups who have seen the movie and approved it who are work with, tribes in the Amazon, and we are donating parts of the profits to those groups. Like,
Mhm.
we worked with a lot of people to be able to go and make this movie. We didn't just traipse right on into the Amazon like guns of pow pow, you
Yeah,
know? Um
exactly. And that would, because that would be an antithesis to, like, the point of the movie, like,
Mhm.
this whole and that's the thing, is that it's like, it was very, very clear to me from the beginning that I'm just like, I think that a lot of people, when they think about Eli Roth, and I thought about this, to a degree too, is that he's just kind of like a broy filmmaker, and so we have our ideas of, like, oh, he's just a film bro who's just gonna make what he wants to make and be irresponsible about it. But I was like, I don't think that it is even possible to make something like this without the weight of the responsibility, that comes with it, even though, like, it was, made in, like, the, mid 2010s, when, kind of, I think a lot of that kind of discourse was, like, in the air, but maybe not to the level that it is right now. And I
Mhm.
was like, I don't think that it's possible that he wouldn't have done his due diligence and continue to have the thriving career that he has. So, when I started to really, like, think through that and kind of read some of the responses to the movie, yeah, it kind of let me kind of ease on into it. I
Mhm.
also realized that I'm just like the virtue signaling that happens when people are protesting a movie that they actually know nothing about, because
Mhm.
on the surface is literally what happens in the movie. So,
I know. It's
yeah.
delicious. And if you're looking for Eli in this movie, he
Mhm.
always appears at his movies. He is in the protesting scene at the beginning when they're trying to get janitorial healthcare.
Mm.
You can find him there. It's really interesting that you say he gets known as a film bro because I almost don't know how that came to be true, but I do know that is what people think or thought.
I know.
Like he's from Newton, Massachusetts. So he's a good
Mhm.
Massachusetts boy.
Mhm.
And his brothers, both of them, are also directors and writers and filmmakers, and the three of them made over 100 short films by the time they graduated from high school. Like, they've been in it to win it. When you listen to them talk about horror, you listen to them talk about film, it's so genuine and sweet, and it's
Aw.
like, "Ah, man, like, where did we get this idea that he was this disingenuous bro?"
Yeah. I've never really gotten that, like, sense from him too much, I guess, like, when I saw Hostel because,
Mm,
that was, like, a very
mm,
traumatic experience for me. Like,
mm.
maybe I thought that, but then, I read some interviews with him. I really admire his, like, devil may care kind of, like,
Mhm.
attitude, but yet it's not like a whatever, I do what I want with no consequences. Like, that's not really the tone he's taking. He's just saying, like, some of my stuff, it's just not for everybody, and that's okay. I'm still gonna, like, make my movie because it is going to resonate with the people it's intended for. They know who they are. Like,
Mhm.
and yeah, and I respect that because I think that there are a lot of people, even people who do all these, like, prestige movies that have that same attitude, but people are very like, "Oh,
Mhm.
what a wonderful opinion that you have of your art and standing by your art." But then they won't do that for somebody in the horror genre because horror is just not, like, respected in that way. So,
Mhm.
it's a very weird double standard.
It's almost as if horror innately cannot have artistic integrity.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, because we will laud someone for doing something, and then if, like, they use blood or gore or FX, it's like, "Well, that was I don't know about that." Yeah.
Yeah.
This brings me to a question I really wanted to ask you with regards to this whole experience.
Mhm.
Obviously, Eli Roth is trying to push the envelope. He said he wanted people to think the person who made this had to have been insane to have done so. And success. I feel that 100%, especially as we talk more and more about what it was actually like to film it. But is is the desire to want to be shocking in film always helpful? Because there are certain films like Serbian film, I think, is a film that constantly gets thrown
Mhm.
at me. Especially in the horror TikTok online, people are like, "You ain't shit if you haven't seen Serbian film yet," or Human Centipede. And I almost wanna find the line, I don't wanna draw the line, but I wish I could put a distinction between why I feel like Serbian film might be too much and this is not.
Mhm.
And what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and, I just wrote an article recently about, for Merry Go Round magazine where I'm a contributor there, so
Awesome.
I do a lot of, like, mostly it's just, like, reviews of, like, festival films and things like that, but, I watched Saltburn, and
Mm,
I loved Saltburn. I had so much fun with it, and then I read all the reviews that of the people that said that they hated it, and I was like, "I wanna understand more of the reviews of why people hated this." So I went through, I read some of the reviews, and, mostly these were, not all, but mostly the bad reviews were men, and their criticism of some of the, like, more graphic scenes, the stuff that's happening in the bathtub, the stuff with period blood and all that.
mhm.
They were like, "Oh, it's shocking just for the sake of being shocking, and therefore we don't like." And I was like, "Okay." But when Eli Roth or Cronenberg or any of these other male directors do it, then, like, it's
Mm.
totally okay for you to do that. But then if a woman director does it, then it's too much. And so it's like it was one of those things where I was like, what if the answer is people are just trying to tell the story, and if shock is a part of the intention of the art and this is just our interpretation of it, what if it's all just okay and we don't have to, like, draw lines on what is too much and what isn't? But I will say there are definitely things that are, like, for me, and then things that are not for me, and for the things that are not for me, I do find myself asking, like, "Who is this for?"
Mhm.
Not like, "Why would you make this?" But who is this for? And I
Yeah.
do ask myself those questions a lot with some of those films where I'm just like, it's less of an intention of why did you make it? Because I understand why they made it. It's because they want to elicit a very a primal human response. But I'm like, okay, a primal human response from whom? And that is a question that gets asked a lot. And I asked myself that question as I was watching Green Inferno. I was just
Mhm.
like, who is this? Who is this for? Because I
Yeah.
think that there is a group that would go to see something like this for the shock value.
Mm.
But I also think that there are people like me who wouldn't touch a film like this with a 10-foot pole unless they were going on their friend's podcast to talk about it. And I got a lot of value out of it, like, not from the entire thing, but I think that there was
Mhm.
a lot there, and I was just like, so I think that there's a lot of projects where, you ask, "Who is this for?" And then you really have to dive in to be like, some of it, maybe not all of it, but some of it is for me. But you have to compartmentalize it. So I don't know. So that's my long-winded, maybe not a direct answer of
No.
what, but it's just like, yeah, I think all film has merit, but I don't think that I don't think it's for everybody. Certainly not for me. Serbian film, not gonna
This
happen.
is, I think, the film critics dichotomy.
Mhm.
I don't we are all always, when comes point blank and the question comes, is it okay to make a movie? We're all always gonna say, like, if you had a story you wanted to tell and it was compelling to you, tell it. Like, there's no reason I don't
Mhm.
want people to make more films. But then you come up across,
Mhm.
and it's usually one in every, like, 60, unless you're having a really bad week, a
Mhm.
film where you're just mad. You're mad that you were forced to do it. You were mad that you had to experience, like, you feel like this was for no one, and it takes a hell of a lot of, I guess, introspection to
Mhm.
be like, "Ah, not for me, and I'm going to sit and care to think who this might have been for."
It takes a lot of thought to do that, and probably some films more thought
Mhm.
than it should. Like, I feel like that when I watch, like, I watched Terrifier and I was like, "This is all the things I hate, but understand why people like it." And then I went to a drag show a couple weeks after I watched Terrifier, and someone did, like, a Art the Clown, like, drag piece, and I was like, "Well, I enjoy this." And so then I had to go back and revisit my experience watching Terrifier and be like, no, there were a few moments that I really enjoyed there, and and obviously, this, like, drag artist who does lots of different types of, numbers that do really resonate with me, I'm like, this number was a little bit shocking, but I still had a lot of fun with it, and it meant something to her so much that she had to
Mhm.
recreate it, and I think that that's really important.
And that's my, like, absolute joy of this show, is when people go and try something that they didn't like, and even if they didn't totally like it again, they now have a touch point in culture to better understand those around them.
Mhm.
It's like you now speak another language, and you could enjoy that act on the level to which the person who created it intended there was this love, and you could see that. That's wonderful.
Mhm.
Same exact thing happened to me, but with The Babadook.
Oh, I love The Babadook. I love
Had
it.
not seen it. Was just like, "I don't know, this seems like a movie, whatever." And then I saw a drag queen do a Babadook, and I like a Babadook burlesque.
LGBT icon, The Babadook.
Because, well, of course, because when Netflix did that one that one year, they did, like, a pride celebration in June, and they put all those films, they somehow accidentally tagged the Babadook, and it showed up on, like, pride celebration films, and so everybody was like, "Oh, shit, I didn't know Babadook is a queer character." I mean, it's not part of the story, but clearly queer icon.
He's queer canon, and then you go to pride parades and people dress up as the Babadook with, like, a rainbow flag. It's the
And I
best.
desperately needed to understand that, so that I watched the movie, and had I watched the movie without that context, it probably would have been fine, but with that context, it was wonderful. I loved it. Yeah.
I'm so glad you loved it. I also love that
Yes.
movie a lot.
And that's what we're going for here, putting the context around it enough that you're like, I can see where they were going for there." Yeah,
Exactly.
there's definitely not something for every scene, like you said, the fart scene where they, like, Haha, of course.
Oh my god.
But you're not gonna pull a lot of meaning out of that. Although every single actor took turns being that person, getting sick on set,
No
and
way.
apparently they brought a porta potty with them because it's all filmed in that Peruvian village.
Mhm.
But they couldn't use the porta potty because the wild horses would wait for them to go inside and then kick it over.
Oh my gosh! Even the horses were pranking people? That's insane.
Just all on ridiculousness in
Oh my
this.
god. So fun.
So, you know, I love that Mac got to have this, like, French immersion experience. They got to watch you watch the film.
It was so funny. And they were also like, cause so I was sitting on one couch, they were sitting on the other, and then like I'd be like, I have to take a break. And they're just like, oh, come on, Lauren, you've done harder things than this. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. And they were so patient. They were so patient with me. But it did get me thinking. I was like, when have I watched something harder than this? And I asked
Great
Mac,
question.
what other movies have I watched that are more difficult to watch than watching someone get hacked limb from limb. Oh, and stuff with the eyes. I am not good with eyeballs. I have found. It's very interesting because, there were certain things. Oh my gosh, Mac is coming in the door right now. Maybe they can give their perspective
Ooh,
of
ooh,
what
ooh,
this
yeah, get a little flavor for that. I
is.
would love that.
Baby, baby, I'm doing my podcast recording. You need to give your perspective to KT about
Wanna know what it was like to
what it was
watch
like
her
watching
watch?
me watch The Green Inferno.
It was like painful watching you watch it.
It was painful. I kept just being like, I'm so nauseous.
It was more painful watching you than watching the
No,
victims getting torn apart.
it's real. I was really, really squirming. I was yelling at the screen, but specifically, it was the eyeballs. You know, I don't like eyeballs. No, I've never been good with eyeballs. I'm not good with eyeballs or knees being broken. Those are my
Ooh.
2 big things. But when they were like, just, sawing the limbs off, I was like, "Oh, this is fine." Like, it
Yeah,
was
that was
like, it was weird, like, the way that but anyway, we were talking about, when you were like, "Oh, you've done harder things than this," and then I had to think about what movies I've seen that were harder than this or more gory, and the first thing that came to my mind was when I watched Raw, and I was like,
Oh.
"Oh, Raw is like."
Cannibalism.
Yeah, I was like, Raw is also a
In the
cannibal
same vein.
movie, but, like,
Mhm.
different, and I was just like, "Why is it that when I watch Raw, I'm just like, high art? Is it because it's French or, like, what is" and then
Mhm.
high art, but when I watch this, which has, like, a similar kind of, level of gore, I just, like I start to, like, lose my vision a little bit, and it's really hard to like, I couldn't
Hmm.
really put my finger on what it was that, like, kinda takes one and elevates it above the other in my brain. I
That's
really
really
don't know what
interesting.
it is.
The only thing I can think but the only flavor, like, if we were tasting these soups side by side and you were like, "This is one chicken noodle soup and this is the other chicken noodle soup," I would say the missing flavor is there's a little bit more camp in Green Inferno.
Mm. Yeah,
It does, yeah.
that's true. Yeah, that's something that actually we were saying yesterday when we were watching it. Mac was like it was during the scene where, they smoke the body and everyone gets high, and
Yes.
I was like,
then
that's camp.
yeah, and then they
Yeah.
get the munchies eating it
Scooby-Doo
with the
plan.
knife. We were like, "Oh, that's high camp."
Bordering on corny, but I was like, I mean, come on, a cannibal tribe all high,
Getting
and
the
then getting the
munchies?
munchies? That's
Yes,
It
pretty
was
fucking
funny.
funny.
It was really
this
funny.
and it opened the door for the contrapasso where the stoner gets consumed by the people with munchies. It was meant to be, you
I
know?
love it. I love how the movie just played into a lot of the, the common horror tropes
Mhm.
and also added, like, a little kinda twist on them, which I really appreciated also.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna try and update something from a previous time period, you have to twist it, you have to add some new flavor, or otherwise it just becomes, very heavily remake. There isn't quite much of a reason for me to want to join you to do it again.
Mhm.
Yeah. I I also feel you on the eyeball thing, but I had a traumatic eye thing as a kid. I got one of my eyes sliced in a scrap with my brother, so I hate that scene as well.
Yeah, I'm never good with eyeball things. It started with Game of Thrones. Like,
Mhm,
it was like once I was like, "Oh, I have a new fear unlocked."
mhm,
And I was afraid something like that would happen. And both my biggest fears, knees getting hit, eyeballs
mm,
being consumed. I was like, "No."
mm,
But what I was like okay with people getting shot through the head with arrows. I was fine with decapitation. I was fine with limbs being
mhm.
cut off or people being consumed by ants. Like, and I was like, why is it that I'm okay with those things and then not with
You weren't
others?
digging the
Mm.
I wasn't really digging the ants too. You're right. You're right. When she mentioned it in the lecture in the beginning, I said, "Oh, the ants are going to come back around, and I'm not looking forward to when that happens." So,
There was a trouble with tribbles situation there.
oh,
You're like, "Oh, you're just gonna mention that casually? Hmm."
I know, but it ended up being fun. The ants were more reasonable than other parts of it. Oh, the one that I got the most dizzy at.
Yes.
And what was the most interesting thing about this is that it wasn't something that they actually did or showed, but it was the threat of female genital mutilation. It was the idea of it and the inference of it that scared me more than any graphic thing that was happening on that screen. And I found that reaction that I had to be fascinating. And I've actually been thinking about it all day of like of all the things that made me feel nauseous, of all the things that affected me. And I was very affected by this movie. Why was the inference of something more physically like manifesting to me than other things? I think it just comes back to the fact that I'm a woman, and in our previous talk, before I watched this movie, we talked a lot about like my my reactions to when women's autonomy is taken away from them
Exactly.
because of how I've always been triggered. And yeah, and I
Yeah.
feel like the threat of that potentially being a part of the film was, yeah, it got me nervous, like very
Yeah.
nervous in a very palpable way.
It's such an interesting, like, mini example. Like, they first introduce it as a way for them to simply try to understand the foreshadowing between, like, so sometimes there are things that cultures consider totally normal, and they willingly do this. This is a rite of passage for these people. They do. And yet for you, it's like mind-boggling loss of body autonomy. Like, you can't
Yeah.
understand, you can't wrap your mind around it. And that is truly the essence of body horror, where you
Mhm.
continually try to understand this horrifically upsetting concept surrounding your human body and how you want it to exist in space. I
Yeah.
definitely wonder how men experience this movie, because they don't would they I don't know, would they experience that, have that fear, because women are so constantly robbed from of their body autonomy, on top of literally having their genitalia cut off. Like, obviously, you
Mhm.
wouldn't, you could understand having your penis cut off would be the same, but it's like a
Yeah.
constant fear that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing is that it's just like, castration for men is seen as like, I mean, it's not so normalized in like modern culture. It was, back in ancient times, but
Mhm,
in this day and age, it's not so much normalized, whereas many, many, many cultures around the world are still practicing female genital mutilation, and it's and it is very normalized for a lot of countries, just not ours. And
mhm,
I think that that's very, yeah, I think that that's very fascinating. And I do wonder what the male perspective would be on those scenes. It is the thing that comes up for them pity? Do they feel a physical sensation? Like, I don't know. And
mhm,
but that's the thing is, we come back to the like who are certain movies made for, and
mhm,
everyone's going to interpret it just a little bit differently, and that's kind of
mhm.
cool.
Yeah. So for you, I guess you would say that scene was the scene where that cult like culminates. Was that probably the worst scene in the movie for you?
I think so. I mean, like, yeah, the physical things that were happening, I think you can cover your eyes. You don't have to look at it.
Mhm.
You wait for
Still
that
exist in
moment.
that mental
Yeah, you,
space.
you wait for those moments to pass, and you're like, okay, we're on to a different spectacle. Like the eyeball stuff, hard to watch, but I know that in just a minute it'll be over, and then there will be something else to watch, so we can all move on. The threat of women's safety just being
Yeah.
palpable and, like, imminent throughout the movie is not something that I could easily get past, which is why it was so affecting, was that I was like, "I
Yes.
can't just shut my eyes and have it go away. It's just gonna be
Mhm.
it's a theme of the movie, and so I can't escape it."
I think that is why people really hate body horror, is that, like, what you're being shown can sometimes just be gross, but what it is implying sticks around, kicks around, and pings in your brain in ways where you're like, "What am I thinking about?"
Mm.
And there's a certain type of person who's like, "Ooh, okay, why am I reacting this way?" And a certain type of person who's just like, "I can't believe I'm being traumatized with these images over and over again now because 'cause they're stuck in my head."
Yeah, yeah. It was for me so much more about the psychological than it was about the visual. But also I think that
Mm.
that is what makes for a good movie, is that it's just like
Mhm.
it fucks with your head more than it fucks with your eyes a little bit.
Mhm.
So, and I do appreciate that about, I guess there's a lot of discourse about what is considered elevated horror,
Yeah.
versus other parts of the genre. I think that
Mhm.
for me, like, being a big fan of some of these more kind of, films that are breaking into more prestige sort of territory, it is the psychological elements that I enjoy the most. It's why I like The Witch, and, um,
Mhm.
I guess, is The Lighthouse a horror? I don't know. It's a suspenseful thriller. It's a grand old time between two little buddies. But
Mhm.
I think that there are, kind of elements of this that it's just like, and raw, all of these things
Mhm.
that it's like, oh, these are psychological, these are metaphorical, blah blah blah.
Mhm.
And then I think that there is and maybe a misconception that Eli Roth is just doing things that are shocking, that are very, like, surface level, but
Mhm.
I didn't see this as much of a surface level film as people were calling it in the reviews. I think that they missed a lot.
Yeah, and it's really interesting 'cause, when you compare it to films like we're comparing it to, like, even Fitzcarraldo.
Mhm,
Fitzcarraldo is often really lauded because of the way that it was made, and, like, this is kind of made in a similar way, like, there was a lot of trouble on the set, and people got really sick, and, like, just, that alone I'm sorry, like, that alone doesn't make a movie good, like, all the
mhm,
actors should nearly die, but, like, if we're looking at, like, it's a lot like this film, the production was a lot like this film, it's really curious to wonder why people don't wanna elevate Eli Roth and wonder why it has to get labeled in this way. Because even Cronenberg, who is, like, the
mhm.
father of body horror, is considered elevated. People say his name and feel pretentious a little bit, you know?
Definitely. Yeah. I think that that is very, like, it is very interesting. Like, what is it to people that will take it to that next level? And, yeah, that is very fascinating. I also wonder, because I talked to a lot of, like, new I would consider myself a new horror fan, because it wasn't until I watched, like, Get Out, so it's like 2015, 2016, that I decided that I, like, actually really did enjoy, like, horror movies, and as a genre, and, like, kind of started that deep dive exploration of it, and the different types of horror, and slashers, and body horror, and all of these things. And I wonder if this movie just kind of missed the cutoff for when people decided that because it was made in, like, 2013, right?
Mhm,
And I
yes.
was just like, were people really thinking that deeply about the genre at that time? I
Mm.
feel like the discussion of what is considered modern, like, elevated horror, that kind of started in 2015, so I'm like, "Oh, maybe it just missed it." And so that's why people looked at it a little bit more unfavorably. But it has just as much to say about society as many of these other movies that get a lot of credit, nowadays. So
Yeah,
it's interesting.
I know, and it's And it does it in a way that I really, really appreciate, because a lot of the films that get considered really elevated and have a lot to say can kind of start with just shaming the audience and just making
Mhm.
them feel so bad. Like, you're here for homework, you're here because you probably are complicit in what you are seeing.
Yeah, take notes.
Yeah, yeah, just shame, shame, and you have to feel like you're gonna endure that kind of art,
Mhm,
and Eli Roth definitely asks you to endure his art. Ironically, I was watching an episode of The Great North last night. Not
mhm.
sure if you're familiar with it.
I'm not.
It's a cartoon on, God, Fox, and, it's very sweet. It's such a wonderfully loving family, cartoon, but very, very, very bizarre. And the daughter is trying to do her own one-woman play about, people taking their, Alaska oil tax dividends and not giving them to charity or refusing to take them because it's ruining Alaska. So she's, like, really, really preachy about it. And she's saying that the line is, "I wanna open people's eyes and then shove my art in them."
I feel like that's what Eli Roth does.
Mhm. Mhm, and I was like, "Oh, shit, I just watched a movie where my eyes were open and then shit was shoved in."
So true. Well, my most formative freaking Eli Roth experience was, like, going to the movies with teenage boys who literally held my eyes open so that I could, like, take it all in, and I was very traumatized when they did that, but now I'm just like, "Oh, but Eli Roth was doing that metaphorically."
Metaphorically, but he wanted you to at least have the consent to choose to
Mhm.
watch.
Exactly, and that was, I think, the biggest difference between me watching his movies when I was young, or me watching any sort of, like, gore porn that I was forced to freaking endure as a teenager, um, and me watching it now, is that I was just like, "I know what I'm getting into. I know that I'm gonna be upset," but I'm like, "But at least it's my choice," and I think that that is something that, this experience has really taught me, is that I'm just like, I'm not gonna like everything, but at least it was my choice to give it a go,
Mhm,
and, yeah, and then you just kinda go from there, and I think that a lot of the trauma that I've had about this genre has been more about a lack of consent in what I was
mhm,
consuming, and a lack of, like, understanding how it may or may not impact me, and so I'm like, well, it actually has very little to do with film genre at all, and more about the environment that I've been in to experience it. Because when I'm safe at my house with my blankets and my cat and my spouse next to me being like, "It's gonna be okay," I can get through anything. But, like, yeah, but when it was something that was forced upon me to where I was just like, I had no agency in the decision to consume
mhm.
it, that's when it kinda hit me in such a negative way. So, that was a really interesting thing to unpack.
It's also very peculiar, like, I can think of plenty of other examples where people do this with horror films. It's fun to kind of force someone, to prank them to watch something
Mhm.
unbelievably dark. But I
Yeah.
can't think of any other genre for which this is like, I'm gonna prank you and be like, "Yo, I got my friend to watch Angela's Ashes." Uh, she was crying, I kept her eyes open, like, "No, we don't do that," you know?
Invited my friend over, and before they knew it, they were watching Hachi, and now they are they have trauma about their dog. Like, no. Like, it
Yeah.
literally is just like it's so true. It's like, it's funny to bring fear out of people
Mm.
sometimes, I guess. I've never been one for pranks, like, Mac will tell you, I hate pranks. I hate being pranked. Because of my anxiety, I'm just like, "No, I wanna
Mhm.
know what's happening to me."
Mhm.
And I think that ultimately, yeah, it's like, but if I'm choosing to do it, it's like the filmmaker can prank me because he's also pranking everybody. It's not
Yeah.
personal. It's not personal. Eli Roth is not personally like, "I wanna fuck up Lauren's psyche." He's like, "I wanna fuck up all of your psyches, and then we'll experience it together, and it will bond us." So
It's so it's so interesting that horror is the best horror is usually open, can get everybody with a wide net. Every once in a while, a filmmaker will throw something into their film that is so incredibly specific that either it doesn't resonate with you at all, or you're the one person who it was for. A lot of comedians talk about telling a joke until only one person is left laughing. And I feel like horror directors do that once in a while. They're like, I wonder if I can suss that one guy out.
I'll tell you, Ari Aster, every time I go
Mm,
see one of his movies, I'm like,
great
get
example.
the fuck out of my
Great
head or
example.
start paying rent. I literally, when I went to go see Midsommar, this is a total aside, and you could totally cut this out of the podcast, but when I went to go see
Whatever.
Midsommar, I was going because I was like, I had liked Hereditary, and I was like, I'll go see Midsommar. Kind of knew what it was about, but like not really. Midsommar almost perfectly mirrored an experience that I had in college where I was on the outs with my boyfriend at the time and decided that a good way that we would be able to bond with each other is if we went to a Buddhist retreat center in the Colorado Rockies for
I'm
10
not cutting
days.
this.
Yeah.
Every single viewer right now is just like, wait a minute, how?
We went to the Colorado Rockies for 10 days to go meditate in the snow. And I had never done anything like that before. But he was like, oh, I'm doing this as a part of my like research on like Buddhist principles and the Tibetan Book of the Dead and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then while we were there, like the second day, he ended up cheating on me with another girl from the group. And then I had to sit with my anxiety disorder and meditate and like work through all of my like my big feels all at once. And I just had to wait until the bus came to pick me up 10 days later. And after the week was up, I was meditating for like 6 hours straight at a time with no problems at all. And I was just like, this is fine. And so then I was like watching Midsommar and I was like, I literally did this, but Buddhist. And nobody died.
And nobody got eaten.
But like I really did feel like at the end of my journey, like being there, that like I had fully been indoctrinated into a thing. And then when at the end, when Danny is like fully indoctrinated into a thing, I was like, same girl. And
Been there, done that.
it was so wild how I was just like, I literally lived this, but like there was no blood. But it was so specific of an experience that like I now like I look at Midsommar and I'm just like, masterpiece, high art, no problems with it at all because it is so personal like to me.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's crazy. Crazy.
And that is a perfect example. I think that Ari Aster and Eli Roth are same sides of a coin. And yet,
So,
if you say Ari Aster's name, people, and I think because Scorsese has given him the kiss,
mhm,
everybody's like, this guy is the guy.
the
But both
guy.
of these films are about people who deeply misunderstand the culture that they're
Mhm.
going to them for selfish and stupid reasons, trying to just take what they can performatively,
Mhm.
and getting graphically fucked up as a result. And
Yeah.
and the violence doesn't start until about the same point. Both of them have about a 1/3 lead up before the first scene where they fall off the cliff in that one, which is
Mhm.
I think both of those so backing up a little bit here. A lot of people say to me the first scene where Jonah dies and his eyes are pulled out and his body and all of that is done to him while he's still alive. Little side note, the tongue cutting scene in this movie is the reason why Girl in the Basement has a tongue cutting scene, my movie.
Oh my god, that's crazy.
And say I found it so incredibly upsetting that I was like, "No, I gotta look into that." So yeah, okay. And
That's
I have a
insane.
real like a real fear of having my voice taken away from me, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah." It wasn't just like gross because it's your tongue, but it was a like, I don't wanna be silenced. But people say that scene hits the hardest, and people
Mhm.
say of Midsommar, the cliff scene hits really hard.
Mhm.
It's the first time violence is injected into the movie, and so it is so jarring and so fast, and there's
Wow.
no lead up to it. So I think that that's why. And yet again, people will be like, "Brilliant that Ari Aster did that," and don't wanna talk about Eli Roth. It's so unfair.
No, that's so interesting, and that totally makes sense. Yeah, and yeah, and it comes back to this, like, what makes something more elevated than other things? Is it because
Mhm.
other people said it was elevated? Like, I don't know, because what Green Inferno has like a 32% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I was just like but I am interested to deep dive on the people that didn't like this one and see what horror they did like. Or if
Exactly.
they just don't like the genre in general. Like that's the kind of research that I want to do is like what made you absolutely detest this and say
Mhm.
like, oh, it was too much of this or too much of that, and then
Mhm.
not like apply the same rubric to others. Like what are the differences? Like what are the, is it the cinematography? Is it the acting? Like what is it? Also, I thought that the acting in this movie was fantastic, and I was very, very thrilled with the work that the lead actress did. What was her name? It was
Lorenza Izzo?
Lorenza Izzo. Incredible. I was like,
Mhm.
wow, I want to see her in everything. She's so beautiful and so like expressive and just
Mhm.
compelling. And
Mhm.
yeah, I was really into her performance.
She has done other films. I think she did another film with Eli. They were married for a while, although they did get divorced in 2019.
I know she's a lesbian now. I was like, good for her.
She is now married to this another director producer, so we might see her in some of their work as well.
Thank God.
Yes, she changed teams. But there's like, God, it's such a the camera seems to have a beautiful reverence for her, and it, like,
Mhm.
loves her, and it's like, I wonder if it's because the director loves her.
Because they were falling in love. I kind of felt in so many ways, and we talked about this before, that it was, like, kind of romantic
Yes.
in its way, and also that her character is kind of like, I mean, yes, like, it's playing into, like, the purity myth and things like
Mhm,
that,
mhm.
virginity and always when that stuff comes up, I'm just like, "Ugh," like like, I get so annoyed at freaking, like, purity myth virgin shit, but at the same time, I, like, understand the role that it played in this movie and in its context,
Yeah.
but I really do feel like it was just, like, he was, like, shooting her from certain angles or lighting her in certain ways
Mhm.
or just, like, posing her body in certain ways that I'm just like, "This is very Madonna-esque." Not Madonna the singer, but, like, Madonna as in,
Yes,
like,
the concept of the character.
Virgin Mary.
Yes.
And so, um,
Yeah.
so I I really appreciated that, and I was just like, "Oh, he, like, loves her." Like, it was very, very interesting.
For me, the virgin part, like, it is so tropey, but also there's an extent to which, like, you can only change a recipe so much, you still need to have 1 or 2 things left in there, and otherwise it's like, it's not a pasta sauce at all if you remove all of it's not even wet anymore.
Yeah, true,
So, yeah,
true.
I totally get that, and her acting, I think a lot of their acting was, can we say motivated by actuality. So, on the scenes where they're, like, strapped to the bulldozers, they were smoking the set as much as they possibly could, but, those ants that actually attack the guy at the end, those are real, and they were everywhere, and if you got bit by them, it felt like getting shot by a gun. So they were like, "We
Oh,
need to tie you to this tree that may be covered in ants, let's smoke it." Okay, good. The smoke is keeping the ants away, but we need you to pay attention because if you sit here for too long, tarantulas are gonna come out. Like, everyone's frightened constantly. The scene where, he almost killed his wife.
oh my
The
god.
scene where Lorenzo is in the water and
Mhm.
she's screaming for Daniel to get her out.
It looked a little too real. It looked a little too real.
I kept thinking while I was watching it the second time, like, Jesus, girl, we can hear you. You're gonna bring the whole tribe. And then I saw in the production notes, she legitimately got taken by the water and was screaming the safe word, but they couldn't hear because of the rapids. And like, that is actual footage of the take in which she was drowning and they had to pull her out. So you're actually seeing her fearing for her actual for her
Oh
life.
my god. Yeah, no, I really felt like her I was just like, "Wow, what a great actress." No, she was actually drowning. Okay, so that makes sense. Um, yeah, that really, really struck me.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's amazing that they were doing all of that stuff without stunt doubles. Like, that's incredible.
They would have had to have brought the stunt doubles with them. It was a real skeletal crew to the point where part of the crew were the tribe. They were like, "Yeah, we'll carry shit. We'll help you
Oh my
out."
God.
The kids wanted to do the little clacker so much that they were like, "The kids are in charge of the clacker for the rest of the shoot. We can't get it from them."
Like, these are PAs now. Go get me my Starbucks order. Make sure they don't put too much sugar in it this time.
You told me which scene was the hardest for you to watch. If you had to tell me which scene you enjoyed the most, maybe it was the easiest, or you were like, this scene's jiving for me. Which one would that be?
Ooh, let me think. I honestly, like, I really enjoyed I enjoyed the kind of preamble to before they got to the like, deep
Mhm.
in the village. Like, all of the moments where somebody usually it was Lorenzo was like her character um was like, "Isn't this weird? Like, why is this guy doing it like this?" Or like, "What is like," and then everyone else just being like, "No, and don't question the cause," and like
Yes.
and I just was like, "Oh my god, there have been so many, like, moments in my life where, because like, I've been doing a lot of, like, I wouldn't consider myself, like, an activist necessarily. I feel like that word
Mhm.
has a lot of, like, weight, to it,
Mhm.
but I am an advocate for a lot of really important causes. I was, like, the president of Chapman Feminists when I was, in school, and, there was a lot of just, like, light shown on me for like how we were going to amplify certain causes and things like on campus. And people always expected me to like say and do the right thing. And I would always like sign on to certain things and people would be like, okay, well, this is the way that we're going to do it. And I'd be like, is that the right way? Is that the most responsible thing to do? And people would be like, of course it is. Why would you question that? Like, oh, like, well, you're coming from a place of privilege, so you don't even know. And I'm like, you're right. I probably don't know. Okay, I'm gonna go along with it. And then before it's too late, there's actually like more damage done. So I felt those scenes maybe it's not responsible for us to be doing this, or maybe we're like
Mhm.
not the right expert to go to for this. The fact that like they were speaking in Spanish and not a single person like spoke the local dialect or even some Spanish, and they kept on saying like dead, dying, death, like the entire way they were going there, and like all of these like omens were showing up, and people were like, "Oh, it's a good omen for us," and they're just like speaking out their ass.
The jaguar who's a protector of the jungle, and you guys are going in there. Maybe you might be what it's protecting it against.
Exactly, and I was like, so all of those things, I was just like, yeah, yeah, this is the core. This is the core of everything that I was like, we're gonna come back to this. And
Mhm.
I loved the way that the film ended with like Alejandro fucking like sleazy guy ended up being like this like almost Che Guevara like style
This
like
martyr.
icon to them because yeah, a martyr. Um because it's like they weren't there, they don't know. And I feel so much for, especially in an era of like social media. And it's so funny that this is like, we kind of had like social media things going on when this movie was made. Obviously Coney 2020 was like a big fucking deal at that time. And
That was a huge, huge influence on Eli
yeah,
Roth. Absolutely. That was major because he kept getting called out for not supporting it, and he's like, "What the fuck are you guys
I don't
talking
even
about?"
know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's very interesting to me, like, when that stuff happened, like, I got all caught up in that because I was just like, "Oh my god, the children, we have to do something." And I wasn't, like, thinking about the fact that I'm just like, "What am I going to do?" Like, what am I going to do? Go to Africa? Go, like, traipse into the freaking, like, villages and save the kids myself? No, like, and so so I think that, as this was kind of becoming a thing, this like virtual signaling that happens around, I hate using the word virtue signaling because that's a really like far right talking point. But I do think
Mhm.
that performative allyship does even more in its way, even more net negative to a cause than someone who's just straight up is like, I'm against any type of progress. Because at least then you're like stalled. But if you are like giving performative allyship and not actually trying to understand the context of the problem and not even trying to understand what actionable solutions you can bring to it, it will look like you're moving forward and actually you're standing still, and therefore the forces behind you are going to creep up and you will be
Oh, yeah.
none the wiser. So
Yeah.
I felt like this movie, for being like a big boom of,
Mhm.
information spread over social media, to have captured that so like well, I thought was really important. And those were the moments I enjoyed the most.
Absolutely. I think the heart of this movie is to ask where your altruism comes from.
Mhm.
This is also the same exact time period as Occupy Wall Street,
Yeah.
in which you had people. I mean, Eli Roth tells the story. He has a cousin who was taking part in Occupy Wall Street, and he asked his mom, like, why would she do? He wasn't really that interested in any of the causes, and she's like, oh well, he and his friends go there and they meet girls. And it's like, okay, so you say you're helping to occupy Wall Street, and in your mind you may even believe that, but like consider what your day-to-day actions are.
Mhm.
You're going there, you're picking up girls to go have a bar or whatever you want to do with them, but like that is not in any way related to occupying Wall Street, right?
Exactly.
You know that at your core,
Yeah.
right?
It's so real, and I feel like there's a lot of people who, like, they want to be seen as, they're doing something. Everyone is It's so easy to just take a post at face value and then just go ahead and, like, copy that over to your Instagram story and be like, "Look at me. I'm an activist. I'm an advocate. I'm signal boosting, a certain thing."
Mhm.
But so many issues are so, like, they're not black and white, and it requires a lot of, like,
Mm.
context to, like, understand, and unless you're fully immersed in it and, like, really, like, actually in the day to day, you probably aren't going to get the story right. And I think that when it comes to indigenous rights especially, I think it's so important to amplify the voices of the people that are actually on the ground and the people who are living these lives, rather than being like, oh well, they'll pay attention to me because I'm white. So then I'm like,
Mhm.
so then it doesn't become about the issue, it becomes about the spokesperson. And as a person in public relations I work in public relations, and I love and hate public relations. Like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that it has a lot of, it's a fun creative exercise, but I think that it does a lot of net harm to the world, because ultimately at the end of the day, even a cause that you think is extremely important or nonprofit, it's still a brand. And when you treat, like, the world's conflicts as brands, then you're just going to continue to fight colonialism with colonialism, and
Mhm.
replacing one system with another, and it gives the illusion of change rather than actual change. And I love that a campy, silly horror movie like this can also bring that kind of awareness to that specific thing even more ahead of its time, when we have more tools to be able to do more potential
Yeah.
damage.
And I think that that goes back to the question we had at the beginning of this part where we're like, who is this movie for?
Yeah.
And I think it is for a group of people who normally don't get this kind of
Mhm.
messages, this kind of like deep messages. If you liked Cannibal Holocaust, you probably haven't been put down to sit and think about the implications of what was actually going
Mhm.
on in Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah.
So I find myself excited when a director is like, okay, I'm gonna use the language of a group of people who need to hear, maybe more than others, this particular message.
Mhm.
And then you still wind up getting people where, if we ask ourselves why are there lower reviews for this film than say Beau is Afraid,
Mhm.
it's because of the exact thing it's making fun of.
Mhm.
There's a certain amount of people for whom they didn't even see this movie. They just want to review it poorly because they know the topic, they know the subject matter, and they assume that it is bad and stereotypical. And so
Right.
they want to have it on their letterbox that they said no to this film. And it's like, oh my God. It must be really hard to be Mr. Roth. I can't imagine what his day-to-day is like. There's a very fantastic movie called The Duelist, and it's about this guy who is trying to hunt down this guy who is constantly dueling, but dueling is illegal. And so he's trying to arrest him, and the guy is like, "I challenge you to a duel before you arrest me." And the line that he says back is, "I'm trying to arrest you for dueling." And I feel like that's poor Eli every day, just like, "That's the point, it
He's
was
like,
supposed to
I
be shocking."
know. I really like, and I appreciated what he was saying about like when people were getting on his case about like, you know, representation of indigenous communities. And those people aren't wrong either. We do need more positive representation of uncontacted tribes, and to understand that maybe they don't want to be in American Western society, because it's better for them and maybe even better for all of us. But like, it's just one of those things where, yeah, I think about that, but then his response to that was he's just like, it's really interesting that you're going to like, this is the issue that you're going to hammer home on, when like there are so many other issues that are facing the people that live out there that they are going to care about so much more than just like what you might think about them, because there's things that are affecting like their day-to-day life. And I think that that's, you know, and maybe, you know, he's also coming from it, he's a, you know, white man, so, you know, take his words at a grain of salt, sure. But it is a important point about like, there are people who really get caught up in the optics of things, but then don't understand that it's just like, yeah, but there's also just like this weird underbelly of like exploitation that's happening that is like not just based off of like surface level, you know, talks about representation. It's like, you know, the fact that he's giving back money and resources to these tribes who like are in real life under the threat of deforestation and people like, you know, really bulldozing their homes. And the fact that he's just like, why aren't we talking about that? We'd rather talk about me right now. He's like, don't talk about me. I went out and I like got the community involved, you know? That's more than
Mhm.
that's more than other people can say. So, yeah, it's like, you know, do I think that he's absolutely, you know, 100%, you know, reverent in his like takes on, you know, on indigenous rights in the rainforest? No,
No.
absolutely not. But also, I see where he's coming from, and I am like kind of on his side on it, because I think that his critics were missing some major points.
And I also feel like if it's me versus him, he definitely knows a lot more about indigenous
Oh,
rights.
100%.
Like,
100%.
especially after filming this.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it reminds me of the discourse around American fiction, particularly the scene with Issa Rae and Jeffrey Wright in the panel where they're trying to
Mhm.
decide what book will be the book of the year. And you know, both Jeffrey Wright and Issa Rae, the two black characters, are saying like, not fuck, not that book. It's not a good book. And the other characters are saying, well, we just think it's important to listen to black voices,
Mhm.
except for the two facing you right now who are using their voice. Like, I often think of people who want to fight for these causes, and you're like, maybe you are not the person who should be representing this fight because you are just not of the fight enough. Like, you know what I mean? Listen instead of trying to talk so much when you yourself are not the person in this situation.
100%. And I do think like there's a scene in the movie that kind of harkens to that, where they're like, it's when they find out that the other, you know, crew of people doing the deforestation are going to be coming through that area like in bulldozers, and all these people who were chaining themselves to trees, being like, protect this tribe, protect this land, protect these, you know, protect this area, um on a flip, when their lives and their status were threatened, or like, bring in the bulldozers, tear them all down, like kill them all. And I'm like, you were just
Mm,
1 day ago, you were chaining
yep,
yourself to a tree for these people
yep.
that you didn't know, and now you're like, bulldoze them. And I feel like so much on a smaller and more like almost like unconscious kind of scale, that is the mindset of so many people that are just like, they'll care
Mhm.
about a cause until that cause negatively affects them, and they will
Yeah.
just abandon that cause. They're just like, "Oh, nope, just kidding." Like, you know,
Yeah.
they'll revert to stereotypes or unconscious biases and things like that. And
Mhm.
so all of a sudden, all of their talk tracks about anti-racism or like anti-colonialism will just go right out the door. And I think that, you know, that doesn't necessarily make people fully evil. I think that that's something that we all do as humans is we come with our biases, we come with our unconscious biases. We want to believe that we're good people. Everyone in this world thinks that they are good, nice, and smart. I wouldn't say every
Mhm.
single person world is good, nice, and smart, but certainly everyone wants to think that about themselves.
Yeah.
And it's when you are put in the crucible of fear that you find out who you actually are. And I think that that's what this
Yes.
movie did very effectively. And that's why ultimately, like at the end of it, even though I almost passed the fuck out watching it, I actually think I really enjoyed it. Is that weird to say? Like, I actually kind of enjoyed it for that reason, is those little tiny lines, those little tiny moments. And I was just like, yeah, yeah. People will just abandon their principles for convenience. And everybody is exploiting everybody. Wild.
Yes, I'm so glad. So we're at the point of the show where I ask you the final 3 questions, and the first question was, "Did you like the movie?" And I feel like we're here right now, you're telling me this. I'm I also when you said Eli Roth and I was thinking about a really graphic horror film, I was like, those the facts that you just described were the points in this movie that hit me the most and why I like
Mhm.
it and why I come back to it. It is delicious in that way, to use a and maybe inappropriate term.
No, it is. And yeah, and I do think that I like this movie. I don't think that I would necessarily watch it again, but I think that if someone
Mhm,
came to me and they're like, I want a really smart horror movie, or I want to watch
mhm,
a horror movie that's maybe a little bit misunderstood,
mhm.
I would recommend this movie to people. I'd be like, you know, watch I'm like, you know, watch it knowing that you're gonna go on a little bit of a ride and you might get a little queasy, but ultimately I do respect what it's trying to say, and I do think
Mhm.
that at the time that it was made that it was pretty ahead of its time. Are there other movies that maybe are talking about the topics of exploitation in much more I don't know, intellectualized ways? Like, sure, maybe, but like that's also not,
Accessible.
yeah, accessible. But like, yeah, it's just like, but that's not the point of this movie. And I still got that from it. So, you
Mhm,
know, it's I
mhm.
think that it is in its way a real kind of gate opening for people who
Yeah.
otherwise maybe wouldn't be seeking out that kind of a critique
Mhm.
of progressive or pseudo progressive society.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that this film is a very good film. I would be hesitant to say that it is a perfect film. I would
Mhm.
not
It's
call this
not
a
a
five-star
finished.
film. There are some things well, if I had to say the thing I dislike the most, it would be, the pot scene. I love the whole concept, I love the whole Scooby-Doo, I love the whole camp. It's just knowing what I know about the, chemistry of cannabis, I'm like, "That's not how it works."
That's what
So
Mac said. Mac was like,
I
"I
know.
don't see how this would work." I'm like, "Take off your scientist brain and just be silly with me for a second."
I
But
know, I know.
totally, no, you're so right. It's a flaw in the
It would be
plan.
covered in resin, and I guess you could eat it would taste like ass and a
I know.
half.
I'm just like, think of the worst edible you've ever had in your life. Like,
Like, they definitely know they would be eating something that was tainted.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But I love the concept behind it. That was my, like, "No, burger," but it's such a stupid burger to have. Yeah, yeah, so, like, this is another tangent we can go on about, like, can you really stand or like a film that isn't a five-star film? For me, yes, 100%. I can stand a one-star film if I want to, girl, like,
Mhm.
watch me.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm like, I think if you look at my Letterboxd, I have like a perfect bell curve. My friend the other day
Yeah.
looked at it and was like, "Wow, what a flex, Lauren." And I'm like, "No, but really, like, I will." And I was like, "I will, like, I will subject myself to anything." And I think that most of the things that I watch, I'm like, that was fine, but I'm okay with having an experience that's fine because I don't think that every movie has to be this like I don't think that it has to be this like, you know, great life change. If every film were like this great life changing, you know, spoke to me personally, you know, piece of
Mhm.
prestigious art, then I just it would ultimately get boring. You have to have the ebbs and the flows and the exposure to
100%.
different types of things. So yeah, I think I
Totally.
rated this movie like 3 stars, and I was like, that seems about
Mhm.
right. But there are lots of great movies that I
Actually.
rate 3 stars all the time. All of my
Mhm.
other friends rated this movie 1 or 1.5, and I was like, that's valid. I can see that too.
Yeah.
So, you know, but that's them. It wasn't for them.
So that brings me to question 2. Would you recommend this to other people?
Yeah, I think I would. But only to, I think a person who's really open-minded. I think if it was somebody who didn't have a sense of exploration or who had very, very specific tastes, I might not because I feel like they
Mhm.
just wouldn't be ready to receive it. But I think if someone's like, I just want to take a chance on something new. I want to watch something that's misunderstood, or like I want to watch something that's shocking.
Yes.
Usually when people ask me, like they're like what's the most shocking movie you've ever seen? I usually say Enter the Void. And like and people are like, "Why would you watch like, why would you watch it?" And I'm just like, "I don't know, I watched it one time, it really stuck with me." And
Yeah.
when, people ask me, like, "Should I watch Enter the Void?" I'm like, "Probably not." But, like, if you wanna watch something that's shocking, yeah, you should, because it's an experience that will stay with you. And I think I
Yeah.
would recommend this movie to someone who is, like, willing to be open.
Yeah. I 100% feel you on that because, like, as much as it reminds me of Fitzcarraldo, and I know that Conan really loves that
Mhm.
film, I would be super hesitant to tell him to watch
Oh, yeah,
this,
totally. He'd be
given that he does not care for this genre at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that he would like it very much. He might appreciate aspects about it, but yeah, I think on the whole, he would just be like, "Bleh."
I get an angry phone call, no, angry message. All right. So, last question is basically, now that you have had this experience, what do you feel about the general idea of having watched a movie that, you thought would be too much for you, or you were like worried would be too much for you, worried would trigger you, etc. things?
Yeah. I think for me, I mean, it's in its way, even though it brought up a lot of, uncomfortable physical
Mhm.
feelings, like actual
Mhm.
physical like I was worried for my somatic system. But, um but I do think that having those experiences with the uncomfortable, feelings and thoughts can
Mhm.
sometimes be, like, of value. I think that there
Mhm.
are certain things that I will just walk away from and know that I don't need it because I'm like, what the growth that needed to happen around certain subject matter, I'm like, "That's growth that I worked very hard to do, and we do not need to regress."
Yeah.
But with stuff like this, I feel that in this, like, kind of timeline of my film discovery journey, this is just something that I had a lot of, trauma around specifically because of the environment that it was shown to me in.
Mhm.
Now, I'm in a place where I'm like, I think that while this isn't necessarily the genre or the type of media that I would, like, seek out, I'm
Mhm.
also, like I'm way more open-minded about like, I'm not gonna just immediately say, "No."
Mhm.
I'm not gonna be like, "That's not my thing."
Mhm.
And I think that moving the needle from, like, this is something that I actively would shut down all the time to being open to it if people think that I'm gonna benefit from it or get something out of it or like, "Oh, I think you'd really experience like the experience of watching this, even if it's a little uncomfortable." Like, that open-mindedness is, like, what art is all about, and I feel like I really, like, got over a wall with it, and I'm,
That's
like, feeling
awesome.
good about just, like, taking the extra
Ah.
step and, like, not closing myself off to it was, like, a big milestone, honestly.
Absolutely. And the fact that you were open to it enough to fully receive the message, like fully
Mhm.
receive the message, I think that that is so, like, it makes my heart warmer. Like, it's so
Yay.
sweet and so, like, that is what art is about. It's about creating because you wanted to, and then having other people come and be like, "Yeah, man, I see what you were going for." And
Hell yeah.
and and yeah, I love to see other artists embrace that and take a little chance. It's
Yes.
awesome.
I loved it. And yeah, and I hope that, you know, as you continue doing this podcast, like that other people like also keep that open-mindedness you
Oh
know,
yeah.
through it, and just like and just know that it's like, yeah, maybe not everything is for you specifically, but like that doesn't mean that it doesn't have merit. And I think that we all can stand to be a little bit open-minded about like everything in the world. And this is just like one very like in its way inconsequential sort of way to move that forward, because it's like, yeah, it's just like an hour and a
Yeah.
half of your life, but it could
Yeah.
also be in an hour and a half that like changes your perspective, so it's worth giving it a go.
Yeah, and you might see a burlesque show where suddenly someone's doing a whole Green Inferno theme, and you're gonna be like, "I get it
Man,
now."
honestly, would be pretty sick. Like, drag Green Inferno? Oh, hell yeah.
I'm
Hell yeah.
here for it.
I'm into it.
Any final thoughts before we go?
Let me think. Trying to think of a smart line to end it
I
on,
know.
but I can't think of
Oh,
I don't I,
you've been so pithy and well spoken so far, so, like,
I think my main thing is that, I don't think that, I want to experience the ants. That's my final thought.
is just generally no thank you to ants.
Yeah. No thank you to ants. No thank you to ants.
So, on our next episode, Lauren will be watching the 1998 3D film Ants starring
I
Woody
was gonna say
Allen.
not Woody Allen. Oh my god, I did watch that movie as a kid, and you know what? I still do not think positively of ants. Young me knew.
There are some movies I cannot save. Oh, yes. So, it has been an
Amazing.
absolute joy to have you on, and, I
Thank you
get the
so
kind of feeling
much.
if we do this for a while, we are gonna have you back on. I'm also inviting anyone who's been on the show once and taken the challenge to come back and challenge me, roles reversed. That's always open to
Ooh, we're gonna
people.
do musicals. We're gonna get into it.
I just heard Waitress is filmed and about to come out so that you can see it, the Sarah Bareilles thing.
Mhm.
Oh.
I think that you really like it. It's very, very good because I really like the movie.
Mhm.
So, like, you know, the one with, Carrie in it. But I think you would really, really like,
Mm.
um, the Sarah Bareilles version. It's quite charming and cute and sweet and real, and the
Nice.
songs are a bop. Yeah,
Well, mo
it's you should definitely watch it, but not the Mean Girls musical.
Oh, go
Don't
yes,
do it.
don't do it, no. Okay, good, good.
Don't do it.
Because every once in a while, you'll be like with you and your show that's about to come out in a couple of weeks with American Psycho as a musical, and
Mhm.
you're like, "I don't know," but then you're like, "Wow, it wounds up fucking totally being great as a musical," but you're like, "Mean Girls, no, leave it alone."
No,
Okay.
it is unnecessary. It's superfluous.
Yes, yes, it is. It is a bit of a hat on a hat if we must. But yes, I haven't seen so many musicals. I'm sure we'll find one. Like I said, I haven't seen Les Mis, but I'm still not sure that the film version of Les Mis is the one to see.
It's not the one. See the stage
Yeah,
first,
I'll just wait
and
for
then
like a
and
community theater to come through. I'm sure it's still better.
yeah. If I'm gonna give you a movie musical, like a really good one
Mhm.
that's like a modern movie musical, it's gonna be Chicago.
Oh,
That's
I
the
have
one.
seen Chicago. I do like that's the pop shit slicero, that whole
Yeah, 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 yeah. That one is fire. It's very, very good. I like the movie better than the Broadway version.
it's even good down to the Mr. Cellophane with
John C. Reilly.
John C. Reilly, like, I didn't even know he could do that, like yeah, no, that
Yeah.
is good. When they're getting the, like, B-sides of a play and you're like, "Oh, I enjoyed that," then you know you're nailing it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
good,
do
so
have
much
a
fun.
soft spot for Fosse, so you will know that I have seen all of the Fosses.
Sick. Okay,
That's
cool.
because I was obsessed with Alan Cumming, and he was doing cabaret on Broadway at the time, so you're stupid I kept getting them TKTS tickets.
Mhm.
I was too
Absolutely.
dumb to know that man was very gay.
I understand the allure. Also,
Mhm.
Alan Cumming, like, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, loved seeing Junie from Spy Kids. Uh,
Yes.
this movie, I was just like, "Oh my god, my youth." He's married to Megan Trainor, did you know that?
Really?
Yeah, I was like, "Damn, what a" I was like, "What a wild combo. The world is
I
too
don't wild, yeah. Ooh, that is crazy sauce.
small."
Alright. So thank you so much for being on. We could rattle on for forever. We're gonna cut this off, and then we're just gonna keep talking without you guys in here. So feel bad about it. You guys aren't invited anymore.
You can't sit with us.
Can't sit with us. Bye.
Bye.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot him, American! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Camera! Camera! Internet! Film, no! Camera!
There's something I wanted to mention here that didn't make it into the episode, but I do want to make sure that all you listeners get to hear this, because it's a fact about Green Inferno that really inures me to Eli Roth as a person. If you follow me on Movie Runtime, on TikTok, you'll know that I've talked about this concept a couple of different times, and that's the concept between homage and theft, and whether or not a filmmaker is using other people's works as points of inspiration or jumping off points, or if they're kind of just stealing and they're hoping that you simply haven't seen the source material. Here in Green Inferno, Roth makes a point of putting in the end credits all of the Italian film classics that inspired Green Inferno. They are, again in chronological order, 1972, Man from Deep River; 1977, Last Cannibal World, aka Jungle Holocaust; 1977, Emmanuel and the Last Cannibals, aka Trap Them and Kill Them; 1978, Mountain of the Cannibal God; 1980, Cannibal Holocaust, cited as aka the mother of all cannibal films; 1980, Eaten Alive; 1980, Cannibal Apocalypse; 1981, Cannibal Ferox, aka Make Them Die Slowly; and 1985, Amazonia, aka White Slave. So there's a good list of Italian cannibal horror films for you to watch if you liked Green Inferno and you'd like to see more of what inspired Roth to make this particular film. Again, I just think it's really wonderful when a director goes out of their way to make sure that you know all of the great films that helped them make this film you're seeing right now. Roth is definitely a director who loves horror and wants to share that love with you, and that I find to be a really lovely thing to see in someone. So even if you didn't like Green Inferno, it's kind of hard to hate him as a person. He seems to be pretty upstanding with regards to his love of film. And that's a wrap on episode number 9 on The Green Inferno, or Eli Roth, with Lauren Chouinard. And I hope that you had as wonderful a time as I did. I thought the conversation this week was really interesting. We went on a lot of tangents and we really approached this from a couple of different angles, but I keep finding myself going back to the whole concept of using movies like this to microdose difficult situations in a safe space as a form of kind of like therapy. And I will probably continue to build out on this conversation for a really long time. So I want to thank Lauren for expanding some of these concepts with me and really, being a great sport on a very difficult film. We sometimes have people come on here and watch a movie that they're worried is going to be boring or not funny or just like, not worthwhile movie. Lauren wound up coming on here and watching what could have been a very difficult movie to watch, a kind of scary movie to watch, and I really appreciate that. So extra special thanks to her this week. And if you're in the San Jose area from July 12th to the 21st, do make sure to go over and check out Lauren in American Psycho the Musical. You heard her singing a little bit at the top of the show, a number from that particular play. You can get those tickets by going to Bad Musical Theater, theaterre.com. Of course, the link is going to be in the liner notes. That's because it is the Bay Area Diverse Musical Theater Group, not because it is going to be a bad musical. I really do hope they wind up getting a recording of that because I would love to check it out. And I hope that you take the chance and support Lauren and go out there, have a good night, check that out. Should be a lot of fun. You'll also find links to Lauren's socials on our liner notes. That's a wonderful way to stay up to date with what she's doing, find out more about the musicals and things like that. She is going to be on Movie Night Extravaganza in the very near future, although I do not have yet a specific date, talking about the recent adaptation of the Greta Gerwig adaptation of Little Women, as she is their official correspondent. So keep an eye out for that. It's always wonderful when she's on the show. It gets rowdy, loud, and fun in the best of ways. Of course, you can always find me on TikTok as Movie Runtime. I'm doing the daily reviews every single day, so you're going to get some new content from me on the regular. And of course, I really, really appreciate anyone who takes the time to go out there and follow me before the entire platform falls in on itself like a flan in a cupboard. If you go to those liner notes, you'll find the rest of my socials so that you can find me on whatever it is we wind up settling on when TikTok goes down completely. You'll also be able to find me live and in person at the East Hampton Film Fest this May 2nd to the 5th. I do not yet have a specific date for the panel that I'll be hosting, but I will be hosting a panel with other directors who are female identifying and who have made horror films. So we're going to have a Women in Horror Film panel at this event, and I will be hosting the discussion. You'll also be able to see all of the wonderful films made by these particular directors and many more. So do check that out by going to the liner notes. You'll see the website where you can see more about the East Hampton Film Fest, and that is for East Hampton, Massachusetts. I myself will be back on Movie Night Extravaganza on the 9th of this month, so April 9th, 8 p.m. That is Eastern Standard Time, and that's going to be a Tuesday. And we're going to be talking about Glengarry Glen Ross, based on the Mamet work. So it's going to be fucking fun. And, you know, we'll also get rowdy. Even without Lauren being there, we'll try and get as rowdy as we can anyway. It's a lovely time. If you like a hangout vibe, I always say, come on, check us out. It's live on YouTube. Again, those liner notes will get you where you're going, but if you're on YouTube, you can just type in Movie Night Extravaganza and you're going to be able to find it. We'll be able to hang out with me, Conan, Forrest, Christina, and Andy. Always a wonderful time. And then much later on, I haven't gotten officially a hard date on it yet, but I do know it'll be in early May. We'll be talking about Cemetery Man, me, the crew, and Renee Ruin from the Night Shift podcast, also a frequent contributor on Movie Night Extravaganza. This will be on a Friday for us, a Saturday for her, because they are in Australia and it has time zone differences. I appreciate that we make it work anyway, and that's going to be super fun, because if you have not yet seen Cemetery Man or Della Morte dell'Amore, starring Rupert Everett, get on it! What an absolute gem from the 90s of Italian horror you are missing. All this and more will be discussed on this show, of course. And one more plug for myself. I will be participating in the 23rd round of the Just Scare Me Collective, which is a really interesting thing where horror filmmakers get together. It's out in Los Angeles, California, although I will not be able to physically go. You can still participate and send in stuff even if you can't physically get to the screener that happens at the end. Filmmakers who make horror movies that are short, under 6 minutes is what we're calling short here, they get together and bet each other $100. They have 2 months to make a movie. If they don't make the movie, they owe everybody else the $100. It gets spread amongst the people who did wind up making a movie. It's kind of like having a gym buddy. You're going to put money down, put money where your mouth is, to make a thing you wanted to make, but maybe you were dragging your feet on, or maybe you just want to get some fire up under your butt to even try and make something to begin with. It has to be fully made in those 2 months and not be something that you'd pre-shot before. So I will be making a short film for this over the next 2 months, and I can't wait to share it all with you when we're done. I want to special thanks Jared, our guest from the Goonies episode. He participates in this a lot, and he gave me their information, and I have been dying to sign up for the next round. So if you haven't seen my first horror film, which is short, but well over 6 minutes, go to YouTube, type in Girl in the Basement, get ready for some body horror, very on theme for what we're talking about today. It is a kind of allegory for the type of personality that has anorexia and the extremes to which they will justify what they're doing to their own body. It is definitely graphic, so if you If you made it through Green Inferno, you're gonna be fine. If you skipped Green Inferno but you're just listening to us talk about it, still go watch it. Try it. See if you can handle it. It's really fun in my opinion, but like I couldn't possibly be more biased. If you want to do me a favor, my birthday is on the 23rd of this month, and you could watch it on my birthday. It's a wonderful gift to me. That's it. That's all I'm going to say for this end of the episode. I feel like I've been talking for way too long. Anyway, there's lots of plugs. Check them out in the liner notes. If you made it this far, all the way to the end of the episode, I appreciate you so much, and I really hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. This has been What If I Don't Like It with your host, Katie Baldessaro. See you later, Space Cowboy.